More infections in Hong Kong and Japan, but global stocks climb as earnings season gears up.
JP Morgan and Citigroup kick off what could be the worst quarter for US banks since the financial crisis this week.
Shuttle diplomacy as talks over the EU recovery fund intensify. Merkel meets Italy's Conte today.
The highly charged Polish election sees both candidates declare victory, and South Africa's booze ban is back as infections skyrocket. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And the UK government launches a campaign to explain Brexit changes as it spends over £700 million on new border controls.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 1061 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
A very good morning from London. I'm Roger Hearing.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. Warm welcome to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe as the markets begin to open here in Europe, Roger.
Yeah, it's an interesting morning in lots of ways, not least the fact that the UK is confronting all kinds of realities about its relationships with China, whether Huawei should perhaps be taken out of the 5G network quicker than previously envisaged. We'll hear about that tomorrow. But also, is there a no deal in terms of our future relationship with Europe? Well, the government is putting a lot of money into adverts that tell you what to do if we get to that stage, and also building the kind of technology that's going to help with control of our new borders.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see whether the advertising campaign translates into action. A lot of businesses saying that they are not ready. So many people have employees furloughed or are furloughed themselves. Right, let's take you to the markets then, because we're just a minute into the trading day. So in terms of what's happening with Europe, we had futures positive, and in fact just at the open we're up by almost 1 full percentage point in terms of the US stock 600. So we're adding to the gains that we saw on Friday of 0.9%. The FTSE 100 also doing well, up by 1.3%. The CAC Carron up by 1.1%. So we follow on from the equity market gains that we saw in Asia. So the optimism perhaps around what central bank action, around more government policy moves, that is outweighing the worries as coronavirus cases get close to 13 million around the world. In terms of the big gainers on the markets, in terms of the European equity markets right now, banks are at the top of the list, up by 1.8%, and autos and car parts makers also gaining 1.7%. The bond market, interestingly, so remember that on Friday, Fitch affirmed that Italy has got a BBB- rating. The outlook outlook stable. So that from Friday. So no big move in terms of Italian bonds, and the spread over BTPs is at 170 basis points. So that's absolutely key. It is also a central bank decision week from the ECB on Thursday. Italian yields on the 10-year at 1.26%. German yields at negative 45 basis points. UK yields at just 17 basis points this morning. And just looking to the rest of the markets, FX, Bloomberg dollar spot index is weaker. The euro at 113.32, stronger 0.3%. A drop for crude oil prices, down 0.6% on WTI, and Brent crude and gold is up 0.5%. Those are the markets.
Right, let's have a look at what the stocks are to watch this morning. Now, Sam Unstead is joining us down the line from London. Sam, good morning. Luxury stocks looking a bit concerned, I guess, because there is that US-French real problem, sense of a lot of tariffs coming in, perhaps not for 6 months, but definitely on the threat level there.
Yeah, good morning, guys. And actually, I think with this story, we can echo what you guys were just saying, that there's hope of potentially more stimulus, etc., is outweighing everything else.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SG Trade, the live trading channel. You can follow us for free, copy our trades, and make some profit. We trade our own funds in front of you and our customers so they can see how the investment growing. For this week, we show you on the one screen, you can see 5 pairs. All this week, you will see how we trade Japanese yen against US dollar, British pound against US dollar, Canadian dollar, Euro, and Bitcoin. Every time when we place trade, you can copy our trades because we place, which will show you when we place before the position executed. All trades equal 1 pip equal 100 pounds with us, except Bitcoin, where 1 pip equal 10 pounds. Okay, welcome again to our trading channel.
Yeah, that's quite right. And actually, so there were more reports over the weekend. And actually, one stock to watch this morning, I don't think they've quite opened yet, but one stock to watch, much smaller, is Quiz, another UK retail company, online retail company, who had an update out this morning, and that they have similar suppliers. And so they are facing effectively exactly the same issue as Boohoo. But Boohoo came out last week, attempted to address this, does not seem to have calmed any concerns.
Yeah, and very significant. Aberdeen pulling out their shares, or most of them, on Friday. Thanks very much indeed, Sam Unstead there with shares to watch this morning.
Okay, great stuff. Let's take you to our top stories this morning, and we begin here in the UK. Roger, with a little bit about what's going on with the Brexit border issue.
Indeed, £700 million being spent on that, according to Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, in charge of Brexit preparations. Bloomberg's Charles Capel has the details.
Gove said it was time to get cracking on implementation of the border plans, which will focus on smart infrastructure. The country is about midway through a year-long transition period, due to end on January the 1st, 2021. On Sunday, Gove insisted everything would be in place for the end of the period, but the UK and the EU are yet to agree on their future trading relationship. Talks between Michel Barnier and David Frost ended last week, still with, quote, significant differences remaining. Discussions will continue in Brussels this week. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, the government is launching a public information campaign to help businesses and the public ahead of the end of the Brexit transition period. From today, new adverts will direct people to an online checker tool to show what steps need to be taken. Companies will also be able to contact a helpline for one-to-one support over the phone.
The campaign comes as only a quarter of business leaders say their organisations are fully ready for the end of the Brexit transition. Nearly half of UK company directors polled late last month said they weren't able to prepare for a transition now, with many saying they need more clarity. The survey by the Institute of Directors says the financial sector is the most prepared, while manufacturers had the most still to do.
Meanwhile, when it comes to masks, some conflicting signals from the UK government, Roger.
Yeah, this after the Minister Michael Gove said a face mask definitely helps you to help others. The Prime Minister has expressed a rather different opinion in the recent past. However, now it does seem that there seems to be a push coming through from the government. Michael Gove says he trusts people will make the sensible decision.
It's quite right to treat the British people with the respect that their intelligence and their judgment deserves. And in this case, one of the things that I think is right is to say outside, you don't need to wear a face mask. Inside, particularly in an enclosed space with poor ventilation, it's absolutely a good idea.
Wearing a face covering is already mandatory, of course, in shops in Scotland.
Yeah, meanwhile, Boris Johnson could announce also a ban on companies from installing new equipment made by Huawei in Britain's 5G mobile networks from as soon as the end of 2021. Britain's National Security Council meets on Tuesday to decide on the company's future here in Britain. That's in the wake of US sanctions against the company. Sources say that a review concluded that Huawei will now have to use untrusted microchips, making 5G security risks impossible for the UK government to control. So more on that on Tuesday.
Yeah, and we'll have much more on that, specifically on the relationship between Britain and China, which is very much coming into the political discussion right now. We'll have all that on Bloomberg Westminster at 12 noon UK time. We're going to be speaking to the Conservative MP Daniel Kaczynski and also to one of the UK's foremost experts on Anglo-Chinese relations, Professor Kerry Brown, Director of the Lao-China Institute at King's College London. You can catch up with all that live on London DAB at noon or download the podcast on Apple Music or on your preferred radio app later.
Sounds great. Meanwhile, in the latest US-China tensions, White House advisor Peter Navarro expects President Donald Trump to take strong action against TikTok and WeChat for engaging in, quote, information warfare against the US. He told Fox News that the Trump administration is just getting started with the two Chinese apps, and he wouldn't rule out the US banning them. Meanwhile, President Trump dismissed prospects for a phase 2 China trade deal due to, quote, severely damaged ties with Beijing.
And in top corporate news this morning, Credit Suisse is said to be considering cutting hundreds of jobs as the virus boosts online operations. A Swiss newspaper reports the bank's hoping to save money to meet profit targets. The new CEO, Thomas Gottstein, is said to be considering cuts to the lender's domestic branch network rather than splitting off the investment bank, which was the cornerstone of his predecessor's plans. And Credit Suisse shares this morning are 1.47% up.
Okay, those are some of our top stories, or the stocks to watch. Let's get the latest in global news headlines and elections in Europe. Good morning, Leanne Gerrans.
Yes, indeed, Caroline. So Poland's President Andrzej Duda is set to win the election. The Electoral Commission says he has taken 51.2% of the vote in the country's presidential ballot. The highly charged campaign saw the highest turnout since the fall of communism, with almost all results now in. The election body says the final result is unlikely to differ very much. Now, in Hong Kong, more than 600,000 residents defied government warnings and a new virus surge to vote in an unofficial weekend primary for opposition candidates. Bloomberg's Karen Lee says this signals continued resistance to Beijing's decision to impose a broad national security law.
The two-day vote aimed to narrow down the opposition candidates competing in key legislative elections set for September. Turnout was more than 3 times organizers' expectations, and it came despite authorities warning the effort could violate provisions of the new law. Results were slated to be announced later Monday. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Singapore's ruling party won Friday's election but had its worst performance in half a century. Bloomberg's Philip Hyman says it comes as the economy has been badly hit by the pandemic.
Singapore's ruling party retained a firm grip on power but suffered its weakest performance in 55 years in office in an election on Friday. The opposition Workers' Party won a record 10 seats and secured 2 group representation constituencies. The ruling party won 83 seats, or 89% of those up for grabs according to an official count. That allows it to amend the constitution, pass laws, and set policies without major obstacles. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And South Africa has introduced a curfew and an alcohol ban after a surge in coronavirus infections. President Cyril Ramaphosa has issued a stiff warning to those flouting rules.
Okay, I'm placing an order to buy Canadian dollar. The price I'm placing 1.35646. Okay, the other place to buy Canadian dollar at 1.35646.
Thanks so much for bringing us the latest in global news. Now, it's a big week for central banks. Let's take a look at some of the events we're watching. Later today, the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, will be speaking on a webinar entitled LIBOR Entering the Endgame. He'll be joined by the New York Fed President John Williams. The panel's going to be moderated by our very own Francine Lacqua. And tomorrow, the ECB publishes its bank lending survey, and the UK's Office of Budget Responsibility is going to publish 3 economic scenarios on the impact of the pandemic. And looking now to the markets, just as we're 30 minutes into the European opening. Stock 600 up 0.7%, FTSE 100 up over 1%, the French futures up 0.9%, and the DAX up 1.17%. This is Bloomberg.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com, Babbel.com.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Aslinda Amin.
It does feel like Singapore is a country on the cusp of change. Let's get insights, perspective from Sylvia Lim. She is the chairman of the Workers' Party. Sylvia, what's your assessment of the party's performance and the overall performance of the opposition?
This was certainly a better performance for opposition parties.
Position open on Canadian dollar. So we opened long at 1.35646.
In a new group representation constituency called Sengkang GRC. I think overall this election was quite a different one from previous ones being held in the pandemic. The modes of campaigning were different. And I think one of perhaps the questions on voters' minds was the timing of the election. We do know from various polls before that there was a sense that the majority of Singaporeans felt that the government should focus on controlling and handling the pandemic rather than to have an election at this time, because its term was still able to run until April next year. So there were various factors at play, I believe.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we are seeing European stocks firmly in the green 17 minutes into the European trading day. The FTSE up 1.1%, similarly so for the DAX. In Frankfurt, the CAC 40 higher by 0.9, while the Stock 600 has gained 0.7% this morning. US futures also pointing to a higher open, and it all follows a risk-on day in Asia, with most Asian benchmarks closing higher by more than 2%. The Hang Seng still trading, though, and only up 0.6%, so slightly more modest gains there. Now, the optimism surrounding an economic recovery is pushing the dollar lower today, currently down 0.2%, while we are seeing the yen holding at 106.9. In turn, other G10 currencies strengthening. Sterling at 126, the euro up 0.3 at 113. The Aussie dollar, the outperformer today, up 0.4% at the moment. 10-year Treasury yields ticking lower by a basis point at 63 basis points, but 10-year bond yields higher at negative 45. 10-year gilt yields similarly so at 17 basis points. Gold continuing its rally above $1,800 a barrel, now at $1,800 a troy ounce, now at $1,808 a troy ounce this morning. Oil, meanwhile, retreating ahead of this week's OPEC Plus meeting. WTI down more than 1% at $40 a barrel, Brent at $42 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Ian Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Florida has broken the daily record for all U.S. states with more than 15,000 new coronavirus cases. New York City, meanwhile, reporting no new confirmed virus-related deaths for the first time in more than 4 months. In Hong Kong, 38 new cases on Sunday fed fears of a resurgence in the Asian financial hub. And South Africa introduced a curfew and alcohol ban after virus rules were flouted. A closely followed regional Spanish election has seen the Basque National Party, or PNV, win in a landslide. It'll boost Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's plans to pass his first budget after more than 2 years in power. The PNV are key allies of the socialists. Sanchez's last attempt to pass a budget led to the national government's collapse and an early election. And up to 200 workers on a farm in Herefordshire have been told to self-isolate after 73 people tested positive for coronavirus, according to the BBC. Vegetable producer AS Green & Co. has gone into lockdown after the positive tests. Food and other essential supplies are being delivered to the farm. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with the World News update. And now to Brexit. The UK is planning to spend more than £700 million on border infrastructure ahead of its departure from the EU single market. That's according to the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, who's insisted that everything will be in place by the 31st of December. It comes as the government today launches a major campaign to prepare Britons for the end of the transition period, and the Home Secretary Priti Patel unveils more details of her post-Brexit immigration plan. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg's UK government editor Stuart Biggs. Look, yet another information campaign on the airwaves, but is actually £700 million enough? Are the rules even clear about what is going to be checked at the border, what is not?
Well, so far, we've reported various haulage groups and industry figures who say that actually, even though the government is now clearly ramping up its preparations for the post-Brexit border, that actually a lot of the infrastructure is not ready and doesn't actually show signs of being able to be ready unless there's a huge improvement in the next 6 months. So it's really coming down to, this final period before the transition period ends, and the government, clearly has a huge amount of work to do before that.
Yeah, and Stuart, I mean, we had Liz Truss, of course, sending that letter that was leaked, suggesting perhaps that there's at least some divisions inside the government, though, of course, though Michael Gove very firmly denied that. Is there also a sense that, in a way, the UK is doing all these preparations, perhaps, to try and make Europe take them a bit more seriously in the Brussels talks on Brexit, raising the ante, if you like?
Well, I think that's right, and I think the fact that the trade negotiations are still going on sort of plays into this on both fronts. I think, clearly there's a game of sort of cat and mouse in trying to pressure the other side to get a better deal. But there's also the fact that without the deal in place and signed and sealed, as it were, the preparations themselves are more complicated, and so it's a twofold issue regarding the trade negotiations.
Yeah, and it's actually our neighbours, Ireland, who are becoming most worried, aren't they, about the border? More comments on that from the Taoiseach just a few days ago about it. So, that is going to be a significant issue too.
Yes, and with Ireland, they've voiced, their concerns throughout the Brexit process. You remember the bilateral meeting Johnson had with the Taoiseach in order to get a deal over the line, and Ireland has so much trade that runs through mainland Britain. So what's at stake for Ireland is clearly huge.
And one other issue, of course, that's very much in a lot of people's minds at the moment, Stuart, which is the Huawei decision, the decision on to what extent to which Huawei is going to be taken out of UK 5G networks. That decision's coming tomorrow, is that right?
That's what we hear, that the National Security Council will give its advice tomorrow, and we're hearing that the announcement could be immediately after that. There's huge pressure building on Boris Johnson's government to reverse its position to give Huawei a percentage of 5G networks, and that's it's coming from China's policy towards Hong Kong. There's opposition within the Tories to how China's handled the coronavirus outbreak and information flow. But there's also the broader sense that, the US, for example, put in sanctions against Huawei that makes it much more complicated to use its equipment in 5G networks.
Yeah. Stuart Biggs, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Bloomberg's UK government editor. Well, speaking of which, Roger, just crossing the Bloomberg terminal this morning, we have news of China to sanction US officials and entities over Xinjiang. So China is to sanction US Congressional Executive Committee on China, plus the Senator Marco Rubio. He's among the US officials that China is going to target. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Ford is set to reveal its new Bronco SUV tonight. It's in partnership with Walt Disney. Custom 3-minute films will run on Disney's ABC, ESPN, and National Geographic networks in the network's first commercial break during the 8 p.m. Eastern Time hour. Amazon is delaying its next big budget video game by at least 6 months. New World was supposed to debut it in late August, but it's now scheduled for release next spring. And this comes after Amazon's last big game debuted in May to scathing reviews. We may get more details this week about that rescue plan for airline Virgin Atlantic. And stocks are coming off modest gains to begin the week. The Dow led Friday's advance up 1.3%. The Nasdaq gained 0.5%. But still starts at a record high. We're tracking crude oil futures as well ahead of an OPEC-related meeting on Wednesday, where the group may agree to ease production cuts. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
You have discovered new ways to connect with family, friends, and coworkers, and that you can do business virtually and productively. Embrace your new perspective. You can't go back to the old ways of doing things entirely. Witham can help your business thrive in this new reality with our innovative business solutions. Remote, secure, collaborative, productive. Welcome to the new normal of business. Visit Witham.com to learn how we can help you adapt and succeed. Witham.
NJIT, New Jersey. Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve.
I'm placing stop on profit for Canadian dollar, 135.666. So stop on profit for Canadian dollar at 135.666.
Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers, and to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
This isn't just music, it's a feeling. The feeling of being out on the road with the sun on your face and the wind in your hair. And because the AA are always ready to get you back on the road, there's no need for that feeling to stop. The AA. Join today.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
A very good morning from London. It's 8:30 a.m. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So this development, Roger, I just mentioned it very briefly as the headline hit at 8:23, that China is to sanction US officials and entities over Xinjiang. It includes the Senator Marco Rubio and other officials. Look, we're going to bring you more on this throughout the program because this could be really fascinating, that China is getting into the kind of sanctioning of individuals in a tit-for-tat way. It's usually been the zone of the US and Europe to do that, but now China's doing it too.
Indeed, and I suppose the question that has to be asked is this more than symbolic? Because how many investments could they perhaps have, these people in China that would be affected? How impacted would they be by a travel ban, if that's what's being talked about? Because in many cases, I suspect the links are not that strong in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what China means by sanction, doesn't it? We shall see. Right, let me, though, take you to the markets before we go any further. So right now, the US stocks at 600 is up by 0.8%. The FTSE 100 also having a good morning, up by 1.1%, with the Xetra DAX higher by 1.3%. In the bond markets, as we get a big week for central bank decisions, of course, from the ECB, from Japan, South Korea, etc. German yields at negative 46 basis points. We're largely heading higher for European yields. US yields at 60.
I close my position on Canadian dollar, 135.666. We have profit £200.
is slightly stronger. The euro really is very interesting because it's close to breaching its 200-day moving average, and that would be a big deal. As for the crude markets, WTI crude futures are down by 1%. Brent crude also lower, 0.9%. So those are the markets.
Right, let's move on to our top stories. Now, the UK is planning to spend more than £700 million on border infrastructure ahead of its departure from the European Union's single market. Here's the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, who's in charge of the country's Brexit preparations.
When people voted to take back control in the referendum 3.5 years ago, they wanted us to be in a position where we could trade with our neighbours in Europe, yes, but also have new trading relationships with other countries. That means that we need to have our borders upgraded in order to facilitate that trade.
A leaked letter, though, remember, from Trade Secretary Liz Truss last week set out her department's concerns about the government's post-Brexit border plans. That includes an increased risk of smuggling and a possible challenge from the World Trade Organization. But Gove said that there was no disagreement within government and it was time to, quote, get cracking on implementation.
Meanwhile, the government's launching a public information campaign to help businesses and the public ahead of the Brexit transition period. A survey shows only a quarter of directors say their firms are ready.
And now to the French tech tax. The US has announced 25% tariffs on about $1.3 billion worth of French goods, including makeup and handbags, but not wine and cheese. France is holding firm on its plans to resume collection of the tech tax that hits giants including Amazon, Google and Facebook. But implementation of the US's new tariffs will be delayed by 180 days because France has actually not yet started collecting those levies on big US names.
And OPEC Plus is preparing its next move. The alliance led by Saudi Arabia and Russia is poised to begin unwinding those unprecedented output cuts. The curbs doubled oil prices over the past few months, but a second wave of the pandemic threatens another slump in oil consumption. So increasing supply just as the market falters, and it could cause prices perhaps to crash again.
OK, well, let's pick up on that story about OPEC, bringing in Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Jourdain. Anne-Marie, good to have you on the programme. So what's on the table then at this week's OPEC Plus meeting?
Well, they're going to be looking at whether or not they should keep the 9.6 million barrels a day output off the market for another month or go to what the deal originally called for, which is to taper. So cutting back some of these cuts to 7.7 million barrels a day, thus increasing some of the production. Many members are leaning towards that as they see demand recovery gaining traction in some parts around the world. Another had said that shipping schedules are already set for August, so it's more or less locked in. Russian oil companies as well are preparing to increase production, sources say, unless they get different guidance from the energy ministry. The worry, though, of course, is that they start to taper and the market actually is too fragile. Then the concern is about price crashes again. And already with this news, we did see WTI and Brent fall slightly when markets opened in Asia.
Now, Anne-Marie, there's a great piece on the terminal talking about the ways in which this is almost like acting like a central bank and the risks, obviously, from tapering almost as a result of that. Just take us behind the thinking around that.
Yeah, this really came to the forefront the last OPEC meeting in June. Prince Abdulaziz, His Royal Highness, talked about the central bank metaphor. They're really adopting these kind of tactics on how they really want to monitor the oil market. And I asked him about this, and he called Alan Greenspan his hero. Not the first time he's shown admiration for the longtime Fed chairman. But now they are facing this similar problem to the Fed and other central banks have in the past. How do you avoid this volatility when you start to tighten the reins? For them, it'd be oil production, not monetary policy. It's a balancing act. It's a fine line they need to walk. On one hand, fuel demand has recovered with the lifting of some lockdowns around the world, but there is this darkening cloud when it comes to COVID-19. This weekend certainly highlighted it when you saw what's going on in the U.S., Florida especially. Their cases broke a record, more than 15,000 new cases, also pockets in Hong Kong, Tokyo, India as well. And the IEA on Friday warned that the accelerating number of coronavirus cases is a disturbing reminder that the pandemic is not under control and the risk to the market is the downside. So that is the worry. If they start to taper, it's too soon and there's fears of coronavirus cases, and they're worried that potentially, or the market could be worried potentially, that we could see what we saw months ago, which is a crash in oil prices.
Yeah, absolutely. The concerns about the coronavirus ongoing. Thank you so much to Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Haldern for bringing us all the details on the OPEC Plus meeting. Let's get over now to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, who's got all the latest in global news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline, and thank you. Poland's Electoral Commission says incumbent Andrzej Duda is set to win the country's presidential vote. The highly charged campaign saw the highest turnout since the fall of communism. International election monitors blasted pro-Duda public television for failing in its legal duty to provide balanced and impartial coverage. With almost all the results now in, the election body says Duda won 51.2% of the vote, with the opposition candidate taking less than 49%. Singapore's ruling party won Friday's election but had its worst performance in half a century. Bloomberg's Philip Hyman says it came as the economy has been badly hit by the pandemic.
Singapore's ruling party retained a firm grip on power but suffered its weakest performance in 55 years in office in an election on Friday. The opposition Workers' Party won a record 10 seats and secured 2 group representation constituencies. The ruling party won 83 seats, or 89% of those up for grabs according to an official count. That allows it to amend the constitution, pass laws, and set policies without major obstacles. In Singapore, Philip Hymans, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Florida has broken the daily record for all U.S. states with more than 15,000 new coronavirus cases. New York City, meanwhile, reported no new confirmed virus-related deaths for the first time in more than 4 months. In Hong Kong, 38 new cases on Sunday fed fears of a resurgence in the Asian financial hub. And South Africa introduced a curfew and an alcohol ban after virus rules were flouted. And Thailand is starting the clinical stage of trials for its COVID-19 vaccine. That's after both monkeys and mice developed satisfactory antibodies against the virus. Bloomberg's Randy Thangthong Knight reports.
The Thai study will begin its human trials as early as September. It will be among the first done outside high-income countries. Globally, 160 vaccines are being studied for COVID-19, of which 21 are at the clinical evaluation stage. If the trials are successful, Thailand could have its vaccine by the second half of 2021. In Bangkok, Randy Thangthong Knight, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thanks for that. Now, with the morning sport, is William Esler beginning with a decision in a high-level legal action by Manchester City.
Manchester City will find out this morning if their appeal against a 2-year ban from European football has been successful. They were punished by UEFA in February for alleged breaches of financial fair play rules. The Premier League club took their case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport last month. Bournemouth have renewed hope of avoiding Premier League relegation after thrashing Leicester 4-1. They came back from a goal down last night to move within 3 points of safety. Fellow strugglers Aston Villa got past Crystal Palace 2-0 to stay in with a chance of beating the drop. Tottenham were 2-1 winners over Arsenal in the North London derby and now move above their rivals. Wolves secured a 3-0 victory against Everton to stay in the hunt for European football next season. Manchester United can go third with the win over Southampton tonight. England's cricketers will have to come back from 1-0 down if they're to win their 3-match series with the West Indies. They suffered a 4-wicket defeat in the opening fixture in Southampton.
Right, that was your sports news. Coming up next, we talk about FX with John Hardy, Saxo Bank's FX strategist, the euro in focus, but also the UN. China wants it to have a bigger global role. This is Bloomberg.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Interactive Brokers clients from over 200 countries and territories have access to its mutual fund marketplace, which offers availability to more than 25,000 funds, including 21,000 no-load and 8,300 no-transaction fee funds. The marketplace is now the largest single source of no-load mutual funds, offers lower, if not the lowest costs on a massive availability of funds, and is comprised of products exclusively from outside companies. Learn more at ibkr.com/funds.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of global equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients, it can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's pgim.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Imagine.
Prepare your child for the world ahead with Blundell School, Devon, an independent day and boarding school for 3 to 18-year-olds.
Every day is a different adventure.
Set in 100 idyllic acres amid the rolling hills of Devon, Blundell's can be a crucial part of the equation if you're considering a move to the southwest.
We looked at schools right away across from Salisbury, and Blundell's punches well above its weight. Exeter down the road.
We're proud to offer an outstanding, quality education, less than 2 hours by direct train to central London.
The happy teachers bring the lessons to life.
Blundell's, one of Devon and Cornwall's most prestigious schools for more than 400 years. Rated excellent by the ISI. Learn more at blundels.org.
Running a business can be tough. Bright HR's award-winning people management software makes things simple and straightforward, getting you back to business and your employees safely back to work. You can view your home, office and on-site staff hours with our location clocking in system, monitor holidays, sickness and furlough, and our insurance-backed HR advice can protect you against employment tribunal claims. Now is the right time. Sign up for your free demo at brighthr.com.
When your tenants have an overflowing block sink and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super drainage engineer in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and electricians. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Values SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass? A self-balancing motorcycle? And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Huh. Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda. The power of dreams.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Eurotunnel-Le-Château is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-Le-Château, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg QuickTake. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and there's green across the screen in European markets this morning. We are seeing the FTSE and the DAX leading gains, currently up 1.4% each, the CAC 40 higher by 1.1%, and the Stock 600 gaining 0.9%. US futures also pointing to a higher open following a risk-on day in Asian markets. The Hang Seng seeing more modest gains, currently up 0.4%, whereas most benchmarks gained up to 2% this morning. In stock specifics, I'm keeping a close eye on UK online retailer Boohoo this morning, currently down more than 13% in London. This after shareholder Aberdeen Standard Investment decided to offload its stock amid concerns over allegations of a sweatshop in its factories. If we take a look at the currency markets this morning, the optimism surrounding an economic recovery that's pushing equities higher is in turn pushing the dollar lower by 0.1%. We are seeing the yen holding at 107 this morning, but G10 currencies gaining on that dollar weakness. Sterling at 126, the euro at 113, the Aussie dollar the main beneficiary up 0.3% at the moment. Over in the bond markets, 10-year treasury yields ticking lower by a basis point at 63 basis points, 10-year bund yields higher by a basis point at negative 46, 10-year gilt yields at 17 basis points. Gold continuing its rally above 1,800, currently at $1,806 a troy ounce. Finally, we are seeing oil retreating ahead of this week's OPEC Plus meeting. WTI down more than 1% at $40 a barrel, Brent trading at $42 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Poland's electoral commission says incumbent Andrzej Duda is set to win the country's presidential vote. The highly charged campaign saw the highest turnout since the fall of communism. International election monitors have blasted pro-Duda public television for failing in its legal duty to provide balanced and impartial coverage. With almost all the results now in, the election body says Duda won 51.2% of the vote, with the opposition candidate taking just less than 49%. More than 500,000 Hong Kong residents have defied government warnings and a fresh coronavirus outbreak to vote in an unofficial primary. The strong turnout, representing more than 13% of registered voters, is a signal of continued resistance to Beijing's recent decision to impose a national security law. And are drinking helmets the new norm? With many people reluctant to return to the pubs, the CEO of Jim Beam whiskey maker Suntory has asked managers to design headgear that will keep drinkers safe. According to the FT, ideas given to the CEO include face shields that resemble an astronaut's helmet and a sun visor that customers could wear while both eating and drinking. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg QuickTake, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, I don't see you wearing a helmet, or a sort of coverall hat, perhaps, and scarf with a tube for drink. Would that work?
That could work, but I think this is, when you think of it, it seems a bit bizarre, but when you think of it a little bit more, it's a little bit of a niche, isn't it? If someone could design something that does really protect you and make people feel safe, maybe it's not such a bad idea. I don't know. Weirder things on the streets at Christmas, like Spider-Man costumes for 50-year-olds.
Yeah, no, look, I get the appeal, but just don't put a drinking helmet into the internet. You do get quite a hilarious concoction of images. I'm hoping that it's going to look a bit cooler than that.
Yeah,
sort of like a motorcycle helmet or something. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about something completely different, which is what's going on with FX in this rather strange market we have at the moment. The dollar's extended its 2-week decline amid expectations for a global economic recovery. And that's despite a surge, of course, in global virus cases. But according to our next guest, the ramping up of equity prices and pump and dump in the US dollar are products of a liquidity bonanza that's reached its maximum amplitude. Let's bring in John Hardy, head of FX strategy at Saxo Bank. John, welcome. Good morning. Thank you for being with us. Now, you're arguing that despite recent weakness, the dollar is still the centre of gravity, is going to continue to be so in the third quarter?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at the dollar and you look at the similarity in the charts with something like the S&P 500, I mean, you have in the U.S. the mega caps and some sort of liquidity bonanza or speculative bubble phase there. But if you look at the broader dollar and the broader asset markets, it's almost one of the same mirror images of one another. So calling dollar direction here is just as much about calling, whether these animal spirits continue to stay steady and move higher, or whether we do get a realization of second wave COVID resurgence concerns, and these continue to affect the data. It's very difficult here with these pivotal levels across markets and correlations so tight, effectively a one, almost whether you're looking at crude oil, the dollar, equity markets. It all feels like the same instrument.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, really... It is all dependent on the coronavirus, and that, I think, is also evident in what China is sort of saying, a fresh push basically to make the yuan a global reserve currency, or at least used far more as a global reserve currency. It's only got 2% of global transactions right now. Do you actually think in that kind of big debate and the worry that China has about decoupling, that is actually realistic, that the yuan is going to swiftly replace the dollar? Is that just years away?
Well, I don't know how many years away it is, but it's an existential question for China because there are so many Chinese entities that are dependent on dollar funding, and they recognize that, and they recognize the risk of this ongoing disengagement, deglobalization. Signs globally that there's a lot of alignment, lining up against China for various reasons, and I think the Chinese yuan moves only because there's a force that wants it to move a certain way. So I think one of the reasons behind it, the recent strength, for example, and some of the strength in Chinese asset markets is it's a message being sent of confidence that we want you to trust our markets, trust our currency, and to implement it increasingly in trade transactions, etc. But it's a difficult challenge for them, and it's a key challenge, and it's an existential challenge, and it's mission critical for China.
Yeah, one of the key things, I suppose, in that, John, is it's the way in which the yuan works, totally different from the way the dollar works, the way the PBOC regulates it, all those kind of things. I mean, that has to have an effect on its future, doesn't it?
It does. When you have a closed capital account, you don't have a free-floating currency. It's very difficult to have your cake and eat it too, if you will. And so some sort of other level of trust needs to be brought to the table, I think, for this to become the reality that the yuan is used more and more, more thoroughly and more extensively in trade transactions and becomes a reserve currency option. But a closed capital account is, by definition, not how you achieve that. So it's a conundrum I'm not sure I have the answer to, but it's going to be very interesting to see how they deal with this.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, basically, you're risking massive outflows rapidly if you were to do that sort of too quickly, and a lot of people think that China's just not ready for that. But what about sterling? What is happening with the UK? I'd be curious to know your views. There's been a lot of kind of news that we're covering this morning around Brexit and the kind of advertising campaign from the government about get ready for the 1st of January and so on. I mean, is it the kind of long, slow, painful decline of sterling, do you think? Or is that too grim a view of Britain?
Boy, I've been asked so much about sterling, and I'm not sure I have the answer. I think the key thing to me is I've developed this idea that we have the brave new world of FX, and perhaps that FX starts to trade on different fundamentals and actually traditional fundamentals once we get back to some sense of normalcy post-COVID-19. And that would be along the lines of current account. For example, current account deficits and whether those matter anymore. And the shocking thing has been since the global financial crisis and sterling's collapse, that the current account situation for the UK has not really improved that much. So post-Brexit transition period, unless the UK is either exporting more or attracting massive capital with financial services, which was how its currency was propped up for so many decades prior, I see some significant downside risk for the pound. So if it does manage to get a very good clean deal, I think it could have a solid boost here of a few percent as capital, the relief trade, capital flowing back into the UK for investments, etc. But beyond that, I need to see the current account sort itself out. Yeah. And to see a more more balance to argue that the pound is going to, see a major revaluation somewhat resembling its historical trading ranges.
John, finally, the euro. Euro 200 moving day average in play at the moment. Why is that?
The euro is awaiting for whether we are post-COVID-19 and looking towards a global recovery, which helps to charge a euro rally because it is the economic bloc with the largest current account surplus. If we get there, if asset markets continue higher, if the macro outlook continues to improve, I think the euro could slip above 114, which is the key technical level, and move towards 120. Otherwise, it's just been bogged down in the range. So it's really teetering on this outlook to improve or not to improve, liquidity to improve or risk appetite to fall. That's the pendulum or the fulcrum where the euro dollar is trading on. So
yeah,
that's what I'm watching for euro dollar.
Okay, we're all just waiting and watching to see what happens with the coronavirus. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, John Hardy, who is head of FX strategy at Saxo Bank, with a keen eye on what is moving in the currency markets.
Yeah, and coming up on Daybreak Europe, Anna Edwards is going to be joining you with Stephen King, Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC. Stay tuned for that coming up here on Daybreak Europe. This is Bloomberg.
The market is unpredictable. Bam.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Caroline Hebke. Very good morning. I'm in for Matt Miller this week. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio.
And it is very nice to have you with me, Caroline, as we chart a course through these choppy markets, reflecting the latest on the virus concerns, concern around geopolitical tension between China and the US, and, of course, earnings season.
Yeah, indeed. So China talking about sanctioning US officials. This is a new twist in the tensions. But then also, don't forget that Boris Johnson here in the UK is being urged to drop Huawei by 2021. That's another dynamic in the relationship. We get a decision from the National Security Council about that on Tuesday. But it's also going to be a big week. We have bank earnings out of the US. We have a lot of central bank decisions, the ECB on Thursday, plus China GDP data on Thursday. So there's plenty to look out for. It's going to hot up to be a really busy week.
Yeah, plenty to look out for. And you might have thought that heading into a week with some more geopolitical tension between the US and China and this ongoing battle against the virus in the US and increasingly in other parts with second waves from Melbourne to Hong Kong, you might have thought that would be reason to pause on risk assets, but not so this morning. The Asian equity session was strong. Chinese markets once again were strong, and the MSCI Asia Pacific was up by 1.2%. That's passed on through into the European session. We're up by 0.7%. We are off our highs of the session, though. I should make that point. And US futures are slightly lower than they were, but they're still positive. So on the FTSE 100, we're up by 1.2%. The CAC and the DAX in Paris and Frankfurt both up by either just shy of or around 1% as well. US futures up around 3 or 4% as we head towards the session there. Just a quick word on commodities. We've seen surging copper prices, which is of interest for the London market in particular, and a lot of that, though, due to supply concerns around Chile, around perhaps or the possibility of strike action we could see at copper mines in Chile. Oil prices, on the other hand, retreat. We see oil prices down by 1.2% on Brent and WTI as we look ahead to midweek, Caroline, when we're going to get this OPEC Plus meeting, and then we'll get some assessments as to just how committed OPEC is to the round of cuts they've previously put in place. But we're broadly risk on, and as a result of that, we see a bit of weakness coming through in the dollar as well, down 0.1% for the dollar index.
Yeah, really, all of our guests this morning, Anna, all of my guests here on radio have been talking about how so much is dependent on the coronavirus and the outlook for it. Global virus cases continue to surge. Florida broke the daily record for all US states with more than 15,000 new cases in just a day. Yet markets, as you say, continue to shrug off the fears. Equities gaining again today after the tech-heavy NASDAQ hit another record high last week. Europe doing well too. For more, let's bring in Stephen King, who is Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC. Stephen, really good to speak to you. You argue that forecasts on unemployment are actually entirely contingent on epidemiology. So with all this uncertainty about fresh waves of the virus, why are we actually seeing this optimism in the markets?
Well, I think the reason for the optimism is partly linked to the policies that finance ministries and central banks have adopted, in a sense that they've pumped huge amounts of liquidity into the system. And if you're an investor, you can't just sit on this stuff because you're guaranteed to lose money with interest rates where they are. So the money's being forced into risky assets of one sort or another, whether it be equities or corporate bonds. But what that also means, I think, is that you end up with a kind of dual economy in different parts of the world, whereby the listed companies, the listed sector, does okay, but at the same time, small and medium-sized enterprises who don't have access to financial markets quite so easily are actually a lot more vulnerable. And I think what we're going to find is that when it comes to business failures, it may well be that many of them are small companies, employ only a handful of people, but when they fail, they're not likely to come back again afterwards, and those people will sadly lose their jobs. Once furlough schemes dry up, we may find a better picture of what's really going on in the economy, and we also may discover that there's a kind of two-track system whereby these larger companies are quite well defended because of their access to financial markets, whereas smaller companies are in greater levels of trouble.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, the extent to which companies are choosing to rely on financial markets to fund themselves, perhaps rather than go to the government assistance. And that's obviously a varied picture. It varies company to company. Some companies have very much used the government assistance that is available to them. I mean, perhaps this is a cultural question that we'll come to explore in greater depth in the months ahead. But from an economic perspective, Stephen, do we want businesses to take advantage of all the money available from governments, or as long as they're raising it from somewhere, does it not matter?
Well, ideally, you want them to take the money because that's what's being made available. And the key point about all this is to try to allow companies to go into hibernation in the hope that when COVID-19 is under control or in retreat, then the lockdowns can end and companies can go back to business as usual, kind of a great thawing out, if you like, in the months ahead. And that will be highly desirable. What I think is a little less clear is what happens in the event that COVID-19 returns, as indeed we've seen in different parts of the world, that leads to renewed lockdowns, and whether, under those circumstances, governments are confident enough to provide even greater financial support in the months ahead. It's pretty clear that I think we're getting close to the point where governments are beginning to say, can we really afford to carry on bailing out businesses into the indefinite future? They're also, I think, a little uneasy about the fact that there are certain industries which are likely to retreat and shrink on an almost permanent basis. You can think about hospitality industries as one example of this, but the other example, of course, is airlines. And the problem is once you start giving bailouts to effectively all and sundry, you have a sort of orderly queue of people coming along saying, can we also have some money? At which point you're sort of socializing the economy in a way that means the capital markets can't do their normal job of allocating capital to where it most matters. And in those circumstances, you have a danger, really, that if capital markets aren't working particularly effectively and capital is misallocated, then you could end up with much lower productivity growth. So you might stabilize economies in the near term, but end up with much lower future economic growth.
Yeah, that's a real worry. You mentioned earlier kind of two-tier corporates versus SMEs. I mean, it's a theme for so many things. Workers who are in work, out of a job. Europe on a two-tier recovery. Do you think the 750 billion recovery fund that's being discussed this week amongst leaders can actually do anything to help that, to narrow that gap that is widening in terms of two-tier European countries?
Well, first of all, I think that money, if it does come through, is enormously helpful. And it can be raised very, very cheaply, maybe given where interest rates themselves are. But the thing that's important to remember about the Eurozone is that here we have a single monetary system, but with no single fiscal system. So it's completely different in that sense to the federal fiscal system in the US or to the fiscal system in, say, the UK. And it's a kind of weakness which is exposed when you have a common shock, such as COVID-19. Of course, there's always been a reluctance on behalf of the creditor nations in Europe to be, if you like, picking up the bill for these kinds of things. But I think Germany has shifted over the last few weeks. Angela Merkel clearly is hoping to deliver something. She's aware that some of the other northern European creditor nations are not quite so enthusiastic about this. But I think in time there is, recognition that if the Eurozone is going to somehow thrive, it needs to have some kind of common fiscal framework. The politics of this are incredibly difficult, of course, but the economics, I think, are actually relatively straightforward.
And Stephen, when you think about unemployment, I suppose a couple of things matter. It matters how high the unemployment rate gets. It also matters, though, how long it remains elevated. With those two things in mind, because this might vary country to country based on the support available from governments, but with that in mind, where are you most worried about the unemployment story?
Well, that partly depends really on COVID-19, how well controlled it is, and indeed whether the infection rates spread through into higher mortality rates. And there's still a little unsure at this point. But certainly I think Europe at the moment has achieved something which, to date at least, is superior to what we've seen in the Americas, for example, and in various parts of the emerging world. That might suggest that the peak, if you like, in European unemployment might be a little bit lower than elsewhere. On the other hand, Europe famously has a fairly inflexible labour market, and one danger, of course, is that those who lose their jobs will struggle to get jobs in the future, whereas the US, for example, has demonstrated time and time again that even though it may be very cyclical, and during recessions and downswings a lot of people lose their jobs, the ability to find new jobs thereafter tends to be a little bit better. So it may be that the US has the worst of it in the short run, but in terms of subsequent recovery, history would suggest that the US has a slightly more flexible labour market.
Yeah, that is something that we will certainly watch. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Stephen King, who is Senior Economic Advisor at HSBC. Let's get all the latest now in global news headlines, though. Bloomberg's Roger Hearing is standing by. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Poland's President Andrzej Duda is set to win the Polish election. The Electoral Commission says he's taken 51.2% of the vote in the country's presidential ballot. The highly charged campaign saw the highest turnout since the fall of communism. With almost all results now in, the election body says the final result is unlikely to differ much. Boris Johnson looks set to make it compulsory for Britons to wear face coverings in shops in England. This comes after he'd earlier said it was optional. But Senior Cabinet Minister Michael Gove says a face mask definitely helps you to help others. He doesn't think, however, it should be made mandatory in shops.
It's quite right to treat the British people with the respect that their intelligence and their judgment deserves. And in this case, one of the things that I think is right is to say outside, you don't need to wear a face mask. Inside, particularly in an enclosed space with poor ventilation, it's absolutely a good idea.
Wearing a face covering is already mandatory in shops in Scotland. Florida has broken the daily record for all U.S. states with more than 15,000 new coronavirus cases. New York City, meanwhile, reported no new confirmed virus-related deaths for the first time in more than 4 months. In Hong Kong, 38 new cases on Sunday fed fears of resurgence in the Asian financial hub. And South Africa introduced a curfew and an alcohol ban after virus rules were flouted. In Hong Kong, more than 600,000 residents defied government warnings and a new virus surge to vote in an unofficial weekend primary for opposition candidates. Bloomberg's Karen Lee says this signals continued resistance to Beijing's decision to impose a broad national security law.
The two-day vote aimed to narrow down the opposition candidates competing in key legislative elections set for September. Turnout was more than 3 times organizers' expectations, and it came despite authorities warning the effort could violate provisions of the new law. Results were slated to be announced later Monday. In Hong Kong, Karen Lee, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger.
Yep, thanks very much, Roger. Now with your morning sports, let's get to William Essler, beginning with the decision in a high-level legal action by
Manchester City will find out this morning if their appeal against a 2-year ban from European football has been successful. They were punished by UEFA in February for alleged breaches of financial fair play rules. The Premier League club took their case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport last month. Bournemouth have renewed hope of avoiding Premier League relegation after thrashing Leicester 4-1. They came back from a goal down last night to move within 3 points of safety. Fellow strugglers Aston Villa got past Crystal Palace 2-0 to stay in with a chance of beating the drop. Tottenham were 2-1 winners over Arsenal in the North London derby and now move above their rivals. Wolves secured a 3-0 victory against Everton to stay in the hunt for European football next season. Manchester United can go third with the win over Southampton tonight. England's cricketers will have to come back from 1-0 down if they're to win their 3-match series with the West Indies. They suffered a 4-wicket defeat in the opening fixture in Southampton.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Uncertain times making you question your financial future? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and help you achieve your financial goals. Let Burden serve as your trusted advisor and leverage its more than 100 years of experience to create innovative solutions to help protect you, your family, and your business. Visit burdenllp.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Cole Bear. Filling in for Smokey, because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Sunrun is set to become a behemoth in the American rooftop solar market. This is all through about a $1.5 billion takeover of its rival, Vivint Solar. We are joined now by Sunrun CFO. It's Tom von Reichbauer. Talk to me about what this deal means to you, really, in terms of size and scope and scale to get you to where you want to be.
This transaction helps us get to a new level of scale where we can reach more customers
and solve a really important problem that's even more pressing today. Customers want more choice in their energy consumption. They're facing increasing electricity prices, and as they spend more time at home, we're seeing increased energy consumption. And so there's just more demand for the product, and it really is the right moment to bring these companies together.
There's been some concern as well that there is a solar race going on with Tesla. How do you feel you're positioned relative to some of the competitors in this space?
We're really excited about where this transaction sets us up to reach a new level of scale. 500,000 customers operating in 23 states with nearly 9,000 employees, and we think the combination helps us deliver on efficiencies that will enable us to bring more products and more affordable solutions to customers at an even faster pace through combining our R&D efforts. We have a lot of respect for Tesla, and we think competition's good. We think there's a lot of opportunity out there for many people to participate in this.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's a risk-on start to the week with global equities rising. In Asia, the Nikkei and the CSI 300 both closed up more than 2%. Across Europe, we're seeing green arrows to the upside. FTSE 100 and the DAX both trading higher than 1% this morning. And the Stock 600 this morning is up more than 0.7%. Basic resources, travel, leisure, auto parts are all lifting the index higher. The outlier this morning comes in oil. WTI and Brent both down more than 1%, about $40 a barrel on WTI crude. This is ahead of the OPEC Plus JMMC meeting, where they may end up tapering those cuts, thus increasing production. Across currencies this morning, we are seeing a stronger dollar when it comes to the euro 1.13, as well as when it comes to cable 1.24, and we are seeing a weaker Japanese yen. Just adds this risk on we are seeing across the markets this morning. And across the bonds this morning, we are seeing yields to the upside across all of Europe, especially Italy, Spain, and Portugal. On the periphery, they are climbing more than 1 basis point. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash, and here's Roger Herring for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Boris Johnson could announce a ban on companies installing new equipment made by Huawei and Britain's 5G mobile networks from as soon as the end of 2021. Britain's National Security Council meets on Tuesday to decide the company's future in the UK. That's in the wake of US sanctions against the company. Sources say a review concluded that Huawei will now have to use untrusted microchips, making 5G security risks impossible for the UK government to control. A closely followed Spanish regional election has seen the Basque National Party, or PNV, win a landslide. That's going to boost the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's plans to pass his first budget after more than 2 years in power. The PNV are key allies of the socialists. Sanchez's last attempt to pass a budget led to the national government's collapse and an early election. And up to 200 workers on a farm in Herefordshire have been told to self-isolate after 73 people tested positive for the virus, the BBC reports. Vegetable producer A.S. Green & Co. has gone into lockdown after the positive tests. Food and other essential supplies are being delivered to the farm. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Now it's 9:20 a.m. here in London. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. And we're joined by opinion columnist Daniel Moss, who's been writing about the election in Singapore and the coronavirus's minimal impact on its results. Dan, it sounds counterintuitive because this is a big election sort of post-coronavirus, but actually you're talking about how it's the long-standing rubs and issues that voters have that seem to be playing out here. Is that it?
For all the disruption that it has caused, the pandemic is shaping up to be a pretty mediocre performer on the campaign trail. Singapore's election was among the first of the pandemic era. And while that was on people's minds, it was not the only thing on people's minds. Long percolating domestic issues relating to minimum wage, immigration, population, the social safety net, and the need to place a check on executive power. These were the issues that resonated and are largely responsible for the opposition's good night.
Yeah, good morning to you, Dan. It's interesting, isn't it? And when we look at other electoral events that are taking place in the wake or even in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, we maybe see that existing divisions are exacerbated. So culture wars that were evident before come to the fore around a new theme, and this time it's around coronavirus. So it doesn't necessarily divide up the people in a different way. It just brings out those differences that already existed. I'm thinking about Poland in particular here.
Yeah, when I said good night, I didn't mean that was the end of my conversation with you. What I was referring to was the favourable evening the opposition had here late Friday night as the count came in. Look, culture wars are tough to describe in Singapore because there are restrictions on speech that can be termed divisive. When one looks around Asia, COVID-19 has really failed to bark, and it's these other issues, some of which might reflect cultural predilections in, say, Malaysia or Australia. They're the themes that have dominated. COVID is the platform. It's not necessarily the entire script. So these elections, despite the new normal, it was the old issues that really had legs, that were not extinguished.
Well, I mean, I wonder whether also it is simply a question of time. I mean, even when we had the great financial crisis, it wasn't immediately evident what the impact was going to be. But, historians who study this and know it better than me sort of point to that as the seedling for the populist moves that we've seen in the US and the UK and Europe. But is it a matter of time? Are we going to see it perhaps affect the US presidential election in November more? I mean, you discount coronavirus at your peril, politicians.
Yeah, well, what can be said about Singapore is the squeeze that the middle class has felt about housing, about the role of foreigners in the economy. That'll resonate. Perceptions of inequality, perceptions that in an aging society with a declining birth rate, is the middle being hollowed out? That's alive and well here, without the sort of culture wars or racial tinge that's affecting contests elsewhere. This is a little unfashionable, but speaking as someone who was responsible for our economic news during the GFC, I'm not convinced it played that great a role in shaping the contests that followed in the United States. Let's take Wisconsin 2016. The unemployment rate in that state was well below the national average, and yet it swung for Trump. Whatever was going on there was not the labor market. So we'll see. My overall point is you'd think the pandemic would dominate everything. It did not, far from it.
Yeah, there were certainly places which had historically low unemployment where we've seen a rise in populism. We will see how that conversation develops. Daniel, thank you. Daniel Moss from Bloomberg Opinion.
Yeah, really good conversation. Of course, you can get more from Daniel. Read his column at OPIN Go on your Bloomberg terminal. Also, let's tell you about what's happening next. Breaking news this morning, China announcing sanctions against US officials. That's a new twist. We unpack that story next. This is Bloomberg.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. FedEx has reportedly notified the Washington Redskins that it will remove its signage from the stadium if the team does not change its name. The shipping giant signed a $205 million stadium naming rights deal with the Redskins in 1999. According to the Washington Post, FedEx notified the team in a July 2nd private letter it will remove its name after the NFL's 2020 season. Former New York Yankees star Alex Rodriguez and actress Jennifer Lopez are behind a group that has offered about $1.7 billion to buy the New York Mets. That's according to the New York Post, which reports Mets chief operating officer Jeff Wilpon would prefer to sell the team to the Rodriguez Group if their offer is close to the best bid at the end of the auction. Billionaire hedge fund titan Steve Cohen has also made an offer. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Where are today's real testing grounds for the latest innovation? Places where advancements in health, transportation, and business happen every day. Cities. Today, cities lead the way. taking local solves and turning them into global solutions. Now, introducing Bloomberg City Lab, a new platform covering the present and future of global cities. Learn more at Bloomberg.com/CityLab. Brought to you in partnership with Hyundai.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Prepare your child for the world ahead with Blundell School, Devon. An independent day and boarding school for 3 to 18-year-olds.
Every day is a different adventure.
Set in 100 idyllic acres amid the rolling hills of Devon, Blundell's can be a crucial part of the equation if you're considering a move to the southwest.
We looked at schools right away across from Salisbury, and Blundell's punches well above its weight. Exeter down the road.
We're proud to offer an outstanding, quality education, less than 2 hours by direct train to central London.
The happy teachers bring the lessons to life.
Blundell's, one of Devon and Cornwall's most prestigious schools for more than 400 years. Rated excellent by the ISI. Learn more at blundells.org.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
More time at home has shown us what really matters and how the power of us all coming together can make a difference. So let's work together to ensure there's a home for all from now on. Join Crisis in the race to end homelessness. Simply choose your distance and challenge yourself to cover it between the 20th and 31st of July. Whether you go solo or buddy up, run or walk, whether it's 5k or 50k, every step makes a difference. Sign up now at crisis.org.uk/challenge. Fundraising target applies. See website for details.
Just one cornetto.
Ada, love your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone I mean.
Ada, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
To London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepke. This is Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Anna Edwards. A warm welcome to the programme. 9:30 here in London. I was going to say 10:30 if you're where Matt is, but who knows where Matt is because he's not with us this week. Matt Miller, of course, normally here this hour from Berlin. If you are in Berlin or in Paris or in many places in Central Europe, then it is 10:30 a.m., of course. But we should check the data, Caroline.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the European markets, we've been open, for an hour and a half. Euro Stoxx 600 gaining 0.5%. We did see even stronger gains earlier, but we're pulling back on the gains, although following in the footsteps of the Asian equity session from earlier this morning. FTSE 100 index up by 0.1%, Xetra DAX 0.8% gain. In terms of the bond markets this morning, So Italy, in terms of the credit rating, there was no change from Fitch on Friday, but it's one to closely watch, obviously, Italian BTPs, because they are so dependent on the ECB. We have an ECB decision on Thursday. 1.23 is where we stand for Italian BTP yields. UK gilt yields at 16 basis points, German yields at negative 46, US yields at 63 basis points, heading lower by a basis point in terms of yields. And in terms of the FX space, it's the euro that is of interest. 1.1308, so stronger, a tenth of 1%. Is the 200-day moving average going to fall? We've been sort of watching that, but it hasn't happened yet. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is flat right now. We see a drop of 1.2% for Brent crude futures in the oil markets, $42.72. So that's the data for you this morning, Anna.
That is the data. Let's get to the geopolitics. Back to one of our breaking stories of this morning, the latest in the US-China tensions. China has announced sanctions against US officials, including Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, over legislation intended to punish Beijing over actions against ethnic minorities in Xinjiang. Trump earlier dismissed prospects for a phase 2 deal due to, quote, severely damaged ties with Beijing. The damage clear to see in the sanctioning and counter-sanctioning that seems to be taking place now between the two. Joining us now with analysis, senior international editor Jody Schneider. Jody, great to speak to you again on this. So tell us more about the sanctions that have been announced this morning by the Chinese.
That's right. Just in the past hour or so, a Chinese foreign ministry spokeswoman announced these sanctions against U.S. officials, including Republican Senators Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz, in what's being viewed as a largely symbolic move as retaliation intended to punish basically the U.S. for punishing Beijing for its treatment of ethnic minorities in the Xinjiang region. The spokeswoman said the sanctions would start today. The other targets include a Representative Chris Smith and the Congressional Executive Commission on China. And it comes just 3 days after the U.S. sanctioned a top member of China's ruling Communist Party and 3 other officials over alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Chinese officials have repeatedly vowed this kind of retaliation for U.S. actions, including legislation that to support the residents of Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. They've long said that Washington has inappropriately interfered in China's internal affairs.
Will these sanctions, though, have any real-world effect, Jody?
Not really. They're largely symbolic, as both groups of officials are unlikely to have much financial or even legal exposure to each other's countries. It's interesting, kind of a side fact, but this is the first time the U.S. has sanctioned a sitting Chinese official under what's called the 2016 Global-Majinsky Human Rights Act, which basically gives the U.S. very broad authority to impose human rights sanctions on foreign officials.
Meanwhile, the White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has warned over the weekend, Jody, that President Trump will take strong action on Chinese social media. I'm sure there are either people listening to this who use TikTok or their children do. Right. TikTok seems to be everywhere these days, and yet now it's in the crosshairs of this geopolitical US-China tension story. What's the latest?
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Navarro over the weekend said the Trump administration is just getting started with actions against TikTok and also WeChat, and he wouldn't rule out the U.S. banning them. The examination of TikTok is really part of this broader effort to protect U.S. citizens' private data, as the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has made a cause. And TikTok is owned by Chinese media giant ByteDance, and WeChat, which is owned by Tencent, is a top communications app in mainland China. It's also used by Chinese users globally, and the concern has been that there's security issues involved in this. TikTok's repeatedly denied that it poses any kind of threat to U.S. national security, though it is mulling a number of changes to its corporate structure to try to distance itself from China, and that includes moving to a number of locations for a broader global base. So we'll see this play out, and again, these back and forth retaliatory moves are expected to continue as these tensions become increasingly heated between China and the U.S.
Yeah, and also the sphere of influence of these two countries, sort of that some people say are in a Cold War now, drags in places like the UK. So you have the Huawei story heating up and Boris Johnson under pressure to basically stop Huawei being involved in the 5G build-out by 2021 here in Britain. So, you know, do you think other countries are being drawn in? What about the UK and the Huawei issue?
Absolutely, especially on Huawei, but in some of these other things as well. I think we're going to see this with TikTok, which is very popular in a lot of places in the world. So I think this will continue to happen. An interesting note on Huawei, Peter Navarro, when he was talking about TikTok, said they're running the same playbook as Huawei by hiring former Disney executive Kevin Mayer as the new CEO. He said putting an American puppet in charge is not going to work. So it's getting political on a number of fronts and getting increasingly nasty.
Jody, thank you very much. Yeah, a number of fronts opening up then between China and the US. Jody Schneider joining us with the latest.
Okay, let's get all the latest in world news headlines. Bloomberg's Roger Herring is standing by. Hi, Roger.
Hi, Caroline. Yeah, Poland's President Andrzej Duda is set to win re-election. The Electoral Commission says he's taken 51.2% of the vote in the country's ballot. The high-charged campaign saw the highest turnout since the fall of communism. With almost all results now in, the election body says the final result is unlikely to differ much. The UK is planning to spend more than £700 million on border infrastructure ahead of its departure from the European Union's single market. That's according to the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, who's in charge of Brexit operations. Bloomberg's Charles Capel has the story.
Gove said it was time to get cracking on implementation of the border plans, which will focus on smart infrastructure. The country is about midway through a year-long transition period, due to end on January the 1st, 2021. On Sunday, Gove insisted everything would be in place for the end of the period, but the UK and the EU are yet to agree on their future trading relationship. Talks between Michel Barnier and David Frost ended last week, still with, quote, significant differences remaining. Discussions will continue in Brussels this week. In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In Hong Kong, more than 600,000 residents defied government warnings and a new COVID-19 to vote in an unofficial weekend primary. This signals continued resistance against Beijing's decision to impose a broad national security law. The two-day vote aims to narrow down the opposition candidates competing in key legislative elections, which are set for September. Turnout was more than 3 times what organisers had expected. Thailand is starting the clinical stage of trials for its COVID-19 vaccine. That's after both monkeys and mice developed satisfactory antibodies against the virus. Bloomberg's Randy Tantong-Knight reports.
The Thai study will begin its human trials as early as September. It will be among the first done outside high-income countries. Globally, 160 vaccines are being studied for COVID-19, of which 21 are at the clinical evaluation stage. If the trials are successful, Thailand could have its vaccine by the second half of 2021. In Bangkok, Randy Tantong-Knight, Bloomberg Daybreak, Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Roger, thank you very much for the update. Now, it is a big week for central banks. We've heard a lot from central banks already, so the extent to which they can really weigh in and do more, we'll see. But we'll get some central banks meeting later on this week. Today, we hear from Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey. He'll be joining a webinar with our colleague Francine Lacroix with the New York Fed President John Williams. They're talking about LIBOR, but you never know. Other things might come up. Tomorrow, the ECB publishes its bank's lending survey. The UK's OBR puts out some data, and there will be plenty of other data actually tomorrow on the UK. And as I mentioned, we get those central banks meetings taking place from Wednesday, BOJ, Thursday, ECB. Caroline?
Yeah, lots to think about this week then. But coming up next on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to take a look at the euro with Valentin Marinov, who is head of G10 FX Research and Strategy at Crédit Agricole, as European leaders prepare to negotiate the EU's recovery fund. There is a leaders meeting that starts on Friday, and a lot of sort of horse trading, a lot of shuttle diplomacy is going on. The euro's been trading very range bound, but actually, are we going to manage to see a close is above the 200-day moving average. That would be quite key, perhaps see the euro move significantly higher. There has been a lot of optimism that perhaps Europe is out of the worst of the coronavirus, that the recovery can be speedy, and that therefore that would put wind into the sails of the euro. Currently trading at 113.06, so we'll talk about that, plus the dollar and everything else that's moving in the FX markets with Valentin Marinov coming up now. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live from London.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
GEP, AI-powered cloud-native digital transformation. Hundreds of Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies work with GEP to transform their procurement and supply chain operations. Why? GEP's unified digital platforms, smart, intuitive software that business users love, drive up adoption, user satisfaction, and productivity. GEP helps CIOs drive real digital transformation and achieve amazing results. GEP, helping the world's best companies do better.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of Global Equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger applications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients, it can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's pgim.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship?
Prepare your child for the world ahead with Blundell School, Devon, an independent day and boarding school for 3 to 18-year-olds.
Every day is a different adventure.
Set in 100 idyllic acres amid the rolling hills of Devon, Blundell's can be a crucial part of the equation if you're considering a move to the southwest.
We looked at schools right away across from Salisbury, and Blundell's punches well above its weight. Exeter down the road.
We're proud to offer an outstanding, quality education, less than 2 hours by direct train to central London.
The happy teachers bring the lessons to life.
Blundell's, one of Devon and Cornwall's most prestigious schools for more than 400 years. Rated excellent by the ISI. Learn more at blundels.org.
When your tenants have a burst pipe and you've got a busy day ahead, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've tucked into your lunch. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable, the lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
Eurotunnel Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Like right now? Get your cook on later with Asda. Get 3 for £3 on snacks like a 5-pack of Cathedral City nibbles and Dairyly Lunchables. Peckish anyone? Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Lunchables 63 grams to 83.4 grams. Prices £1.50 to £1.55. Offers end 22nd of July.
We've got some of your faves waiting for you on Just Eat. KFC, Burger King and Subway. Spend as much or as little as you like. No minimum spend here. We'll always deliver like a G. I mean, I would know. I'm pretty G myself, thank you very much.
Hear somebody say, Just Eat.
T's and C's apply. Selected stores and locations.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's a risk-on start to the week with global equities rising, although we are off the highs of the session when it comes to the European market. Still, the FTSE 100 up 0.8% alongside the DAX as well. The Stock 600 this morning trading higher, up 0.7%. Basic resources, travel, and leisure are all lifting the gains in the Stock 600. Actually, we're up 0.4% there. In terms of what happened overnight in Asia, we did see strong gains across the Nikkei and Japan and the CSI 300, both those indices closing up more than 2%. The outlier of today and some weakness we are seeing is in the oil market. WTI is down 1.8%, trading just under $40 a barrel as OPEC Plus meets this week for a JMMC meeting when they look to taper the cuts, thus increasing production. When it comes to foreign exchange this morning, euro dollar 1.13, and cable this morning 1.26. And across the bond market this morning, across Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal are all those yields are up more than 1 basis point. We are seeing yields in Europe to the upside. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and here's Roger Hearing with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Only a quarter of business leaders say their organisations are fully ready for the end of the Brexit transition period. Nearly half of UK company directors polled late last month said they weren't able to prepare for a transition now, with many saying they need more clarity. The survey by the Institute of Directors found the financial sector the most prepared, while manufacturers had the most still to do. Pope Francis has said he's deeply pained by Turkey's decision to change Istanbul's Hagia Sophia back into a mosque. The Roman Catholic leader added his thoughts go to Istanbul during a service at the Vatican. Hagia Sophia was built as a Christian cathedral nearly 1,500 years ago before being turned into a mosque after the 15th century Ottoman conquest. And are drinking helmets now the new norm? With many people reluctant to return to pubs, the CEO of the Jim Beam whiskey maker, Suntory, has asked managers to design headgear that will keep drinkers safe. According to Financial Times, ideas given to the CEO include face shields that resemble an astronaut's helmet and a sun visor that customers could wear while eating and drinking. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Drinking helmets. Of all the weeks for Matt Miller to be off, I feel like he could have added more to this conversation. Roger, thank you very much. Roger Hearing with the latest in global news. Coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak stateside. Let's check in with Nathan Hager, who's got a preview of what lies ahead.
Yes,
Nathan.
Indeed. Well, we're continuing to watch the coronavirus surge in this country. Good morning, Anna. Case counts continue to rise in the Sun Belt, so much so that Florida just reported the biggest one-day increase in infections of any state since the pandemic began, including the former hotspot of New York. Despite that, top health officials in this country say we're in a better place in terms of testing and equipment than when we were at the last height of the outbreak. But what does this relentless pandemic mean for the economic recovery going forward? We're going to get insights from a very important guest this morning. Dennis Gartman, the former publisher of the Gartman Letter, is with us for our first hour. We're also getting ready for bank earnings in a quarter dominated by COVID-19. It is not expected to be pretty. Allison Williams of Bloomberg Intelligence will join me and Karen Moscow. Hope you will as well for a Monday morning edition of Bloomberg Daybreak. Anna.
Thank you very much, Nathan. Dennis Gartman, it'd be great to hear his thoughts then. Really good to get that kind of long perspective on the markets from somebody who's, seen this stuff. I was going to say before, but nobody's seen this before, have they? Yeah. But we're really good to get his insight. Nathan, thank you. Nathan Hager and team, Bloomberg Daybreak is up next. Or if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance. Caroline?
Yeah, we still have one more guest, though, this hour to get to. The euro has been basking in the goodwill of FX investors since the Franco-German proposal for an EU recovery fund, which, of course, was announced in May. That fiscal support has fueled a rally for the common currency that has seen investors amass their biggest euro long since 2018. That's according to our next guest. Joining us this morning is Valentin Marinov, who is head of G10 FX Research and Strategy at Crédit Agricole. Thank you, Valentin, so much for being with us. EU leaders preparing for the negotiation, the shuttle diplomacy and potentially a deal. You think that the bloc's support is the thing that's keeping up the euro, of course, and I've been watching the 200-day moving average. Does that fall? If so, when, how?
Well, indeed, there is a lot of potentially good news ahead for the euro. As per usual, the timing of the good news remains a key driver, and unfortunately at the moment still somewhat uncertain. But very near term, all eyes will be on the extraordinary EU summit. So we hope that a deal on the EU recovery fund could be reached, and that could propel the euro higher still. All that said, clearly we cannot rule out the risk of a potential disappointment. But even in that case, I have to say euro remains buy on dips. We think that the euro has embarked on a longer-term uptrend against the dollar here, potentially targeting really like 120 or levels above that really in coming months. So I suspect that if indeed this week's EU summit does produce an outcome which is positive for the euro, as in a compromise on the EU recovery fund, that could encourage longer-term investors really seeing euro as a value play, which who think that still the euro is cheap at current levels, to really get on that bandwagon, propelling the currency higher still.
Yeah, Valentin, good morning. That's interesting. So you think it could go higher still, so you don't think the full impact of the recovery fund is priced in just yet to risk assets, including the euro?
Well, not necessarily. It is the case.
Okay, I'm placing an order to buy Bitcoin. So anybody interested in Bitcoin, the order placed at 9,274. 9,274 for Bitcoin. Okay.
For foreign investors, we are already seeing evidence of repatriation by Eurozone investors away from the US back into Europe from the more recent ECB balance of payment data. And I think that a positive outcome from the summit this week, or potentially a compromise in the coming weeks and months, potentially by the end of September, could ultimately boost the appeal of those that have, say, rather liquid assets. So the diversification argument could continue to support the euro, especially against the dollar. And in terms of valuation, as I was saying, euro is still looking quite cheap at current level.
Yeah, but then, of course, it's also dependent on the coronavirus and the recovery, if indeed that is the phase that we are in now. And the dollar's extended a 2-week decline because of these expectations of global economic recovery. But actually, we're seeing global coronavirus cases continue to climb, and in the US, absolutely surge.
Well, an important driver behind the dollar underperformance and I guess euro-dollar's outperformance in particular is the fact that investors are, for the time being, ignoring the second wave of COVID-19 in the U.S., other countries. And I guess one of the reasons there is the fact that the mortality rate has been actually falling, and that seems to correlate better with the performance of risky assets than the overall number of new infections or indeed cases. And I guess that confirms the view that for the time being, any further escalation in the number of cases should not lead to renewed lockdowns or indeed the introduction of lockdown measures as stringent as the ones we've had really not so long ago. So what is happening really, it seems to be that where the U.S. has had this history of relatively mild lockdown measures, less stringent, especially in comparison to Europe, they are now forced to really slow down the opening up of the U.S. officials, slowing down the opening up of the economy, whereas at the same time in Europe, we really had a fairly stringent really set of lockdown measures are now successfully emerging from there. So it's a sense of convergence, if you wish, for those two market asset classes. If you so more globally, I think that investors continue to believe that irrespective of the latest escalation in the cases, this should not necessarily produce new stringent lockdown measures anytime soon. By implication, appetite for diversification away from the dollar still very much in place, and it seems like the euro likely to continue to benefit from that.
Just briefly, Valentin, what is your top pick in the world of FX right now?
Well, we have euro dollar, and we think that it's going to go higher. We also believe that euro as a whole European complex, really Scandinavian currencies, could indeed benefit from their role as higher betas to euro. So they still look interesting, especially also from a value perspective there. Overall, however, looking beyond Europe, I think that some positives are already in the price of other risk-correlated commodity currencies. So we like to play that more geographical scheme, if you wish. Euro outperformance versus North America in comparable risk packets. So you prefer Norwegian crown versus the Canadian dollar. You prefer the euro versus the dollar itself. Asia also looking interesting, predominantly on the basis of that idea that you're going to see more rebalancing of really global portfolios whereby investors will be overweighting really assets outside of the U.S. while going underweight or more neutral the U.S. So that could be an argument for stronger Australian dollar, potentially renminbi from here.
Okay, interesting. Valentin, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Valentin Marinov, head of G10 FX Research and Strategy at Crédit Agricole. He goes on to Bloomberg Television, TV Go on your terminal to get more from Valentin. But next up, Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow will be live from New York. This is Bloomberg.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the complete...
Order to buy Bitcoin removed. It moves too fast and too far. I'll wait until it will go closer to the level I want to buy it.
More people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Vision Express stores are open again for all your eye care needs. So you can now book an eye test. And while we look after your eyes, we're looking out for your safety too by following social distancing measures and using personal protective equipment. Find your nearest store and book online at visionexpress.com. We're open for you.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, July 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Florida overtakes New York as the country's top coronavirus hotspot.
Disney opens theme parks in the state despite a surge in cases.
White House officials double down on the push to reopen schools.
And China targets U.S. senators with fresh sanctions.
New York City reaches a positive milestone in the fight against COVID-19, plus more than a dozen sailors were injured after a fire on board a U.S. Navy ship. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stanshauer in sports. Great finishes in golf and NASCAR, and the NFL team in Washington will no longer be called the Redskins.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. And U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It is coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 9 points. Dow futures up 92. NASDAQ futures up 47. The DAX in Germany is up 0.9%. CAC in Paris up 0.5%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.8%. Nikkei 225 in Japan jumped 2.2%, and the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was up 0.2%. 10-year Treasury up 3/32, yield 0.63%. Yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.9% or 75 cents at $39.80 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.6% or $11.50 at $18.1340 an ounce. The euro 1.1311 against the dollar. The yen is at 107.05. Nathan.
Karen, we begin in Florida with the state hitting a record for coronavirus infections. It's reporting more than 15,000 daily cases, the highest level ever for any state, even New York. At the same time, the push to reopen schools is gathering steam. Alberto Carvalho is superintendent of Miami-Dade County Schools.
It is quite possible, if the social behavior and the restrictions in place, if people wear masks, if people exercise social distancing, that conditions may be appropriate and healthy for students to return to the very best model of teaching and learning, which is in person.
Carvalho spoke on Meet the Press, heard right here on Bloomberg Radio. He says Miami-Dade will likely open up sports training camps at schools later this month.
And Florida is not alone. The push to reopen classrooms is coming on strong from the White House.
There's nothing in the data that suggests that kids being in school is in any way dangerous.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos took to Fox News Sunday, heard on Bloomberg Radio, to downplay the health risks of students returning to classrooms.
Parents are expecting that this fall their kids are going to have a full-time experience with their learning, and we need to follow through on that promise.
DeVos is also repeating threats from President Trump to cut funding for schools that don't fully resume in-person learning this fall.
Meantime, in Arizona, deaths from the virus rose for a third day. Cases declined. South Carolina reported its highest positivity rate on record, with 22% of tests coming back positive for COVID-19. In states like those, a few simple changes could do a lot to curb the virus. That's according to Assistant Secretary of Health, Admiral Brett Giroir.
Closing bars is an important thing. Limiting the capacity of restaurants is an important thing.
President Trump's former head of coronavirus testing spoke on ABC's This Week, also heard on Bloomberg Radio. He says the administration is monitoring the outbreak and thinks it can be contained.
We are all very concerned about the rise in cases, no doubt about that, and that's why we're meeting regularly. We're surging in assistance, but we are in a much better place.
That place right now has daily U.S. infections rising by nearly 60,000 a day.
On average, California accounts for nearly 10,000 of those daily cases, and now there's word the virus is spreading at one of the state's favorite summer vacation spots. Here with more is Ed Baxter from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
South Lake Tahoe, with the influx of people wanting to get into boats, wanting to party and drink, there is concern for the next weeks, and already a reported increase in per capita infection rate exceeding the state's goals. El Dorado County's health director, Dr. Nancy Williams, says if South Lake Tahoe, if it were the region, were its own county, it would now be added to the state's monitoring list and asked to curtail certain activities. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. Back in Florida, Disney opened its Magic Kingdom and Animal Kingdom parks on Saturday, despite surging infections in the state. We spoke with Disney's chairman of parks, Josh D'Amaro, who joined us from Magic Kingdom.
There's a responsibility for both our guests and in our operating environment. And as we continue to open up, we're adjusting and modifying where we need to modify. But I'd say in general, if you were to walk down Main Street today or look around a merchandise shop, you're going to see a very different experience than you ever have before.
Disney's conducting temperature checks at the gate, mandating masks and controlling capacity by requiring reservations. Still, employee unions are asking for even more precautions. Disney's Epcot and Hollywood Studios parks are scheduled to open Wednesday.
And we turn now from coronavirus news to increasing tensions between the U.S. and China. This morning, Beijing announced sanctions against U.S. officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. It's seen as retaliation for U.S. measures tied to the treatment of ethnic minorities in China. Bloomberg's Jody Schneider has more from Hong Kong.
This is very much in this back and forth we continue to see. Whenever the U.S. does something to raise the tensions, we see it on the Chinese side within a week. So clearly we are seeing the pushback right now from the Chinese government.
The move is seen as largely symbolic. China's foreign ministry says sanctions take effect today, but declined to elaborate on specific measures.
On the corporate front, we have an acquisition shaping up in the chip industry. Sources tell us Analog Devices is close to a deal to buy Maxim Integrated Products for about $17 billion. The semiconductor companies could announce an agreement as soon as today, though sources warn discussions could still fall apart.
A prominent bank is preparing for job cuts. According to Swiss media, Credit Suisse is considering a savings plan that could cut hundreds of positions. The bank is reportedly mulling reductions to domestic branches as the pandemic boosts online operations.
Oil is falling as OPEC prepares its next move. Historic output cuts helped prices double in the past few months. Now the group's considering how to unwind those measures. OPEC and its allies hold an online summit Wednesday. We're seeing crude decline ahead of that meeting. Right now, NYMEX crude is lower by 1.8% or 73 cents at $39.82 a barrel. Brent is down 1.4% at $42.63.
Meanwhile, futures are higher. S&P futures up 11 points. Dow futures up 119. And NASDAQ futures up 51. 10-year Treasury up 3/30 seconds. Yield 0.63%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Now let's bring in Michael Barr for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. New York City, once the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak, reported its first day with 0 confirmed or probable virus deaths since the pandemic hit New York State. The milestone came in initial data from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. It marked the end of a 4-month stretch since the city reported its first COVID-19 fatality on March 11th. The confirmed daily death count hit its highest on April 7th at 597. Meanwhile, children can return to daycare today in New York. Among several restrictions, no more than 15 children will be allowed in a classroom. More than a dozen sailors were hospitalized after fire broke out on the USS Bonhomme Richard in Naval Base San Diego. Rear Admiral Philip Sobek.
Sailors across this waterfront are absolutely doing a magnificent job to save the USS Bonhomme Richard. They're fighting their ship, and they're saving their ship.
What started the fire is not clear. The ship was undergoing maintenance or construction. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has taken a 5-point lead over President Trump among voters in Texas following a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths there. According to a poll by Dallas Morning News University of Texas at Tyler survey, Biden has 46% compared to 41% for Trump. Senator Lindsey Graham is preparing to invite former special counsel Robert Mueller to testify before a Senate panel about the probe of Russian interference in the 2016 election. Graham, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, tweeted earlier that he would grant a prior request by Democrats on the panel made in 2019 for Mueller to appear. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi continued to slam President Trump's decision to commute the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor Roger Stone as an act of staggering corruption. Pelosi spoke on CNN's State of the Union.
People should know this isn't just about lying to Congress. That means lying to the American people, witness tampering and the rest. And it's about our national security.
The White House earlier said Stone is a victim of the Russia hoax that the left and its allies in the media perpetuated for years. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Good morning, John Stashower.
All right, good morning, Nathan. It becomes official today. The football team in Washington will no longer be called the Redskins. That news had been coming since corporate sponsors began to demand that owner Dan Snyder give in to calls for the change. Still unknown as what the new name will be. The Lakers have lost a key player, nothing to do with COVID. Rajon Rondo broke his thumb at practice last night, likely to miss most, if not all, of the upcoming NBA playoffs. Exciting finishes in golf and NASCAR, Muirfield, Ohio. Justin Thomas led Colin Morikawa by 3 shots with 3 holes to play. They went to a playoff. Thomas rolled in a 50-foot putt, but Morikawa made a 25-footer of his own. And then Thomas missed a 9-foot putt that would have won it on the second extra hole, and Morikawa won on the third, his second career title. NASCAR in Kentucky, 22-year-old Cole Custer passed 3 drivers on the final lap and got his first title. Yankee closer Aroldis Chapman tested positive for COVID. Not known how long he'll be out, but manager Aaron Boone has a replacement in Zach Britton.
Look, obviously Britton's been an elite closer in this game for a long time and still a great pitcher, so he naturally could fill that role. It's easy to put him in that, but again, with our team and with our bullpen and our pitchers, we feel confident in a lot of guys. But Britt would be a natural guy if Chappie wasn't back at that point.
Garrett Cole again looked sharp in an intra-squad game yesterday at the stadium. Aaron Judge didn't play. He's got a stiff neck. Clint Frazier among the MLB players who will wear a mask during games. Frazier says it's a good example to set. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
And John, a Swiss sports shoe company backed by tennis star Roger Federer is preparing an IPO as soon as next year. That's according to Swiss media, which say the company called On could be worth more than $2 billion. On's running shoes are available in more than 6,500 shops around the world. S&P futures higher by 11 points. Dow futures up 122. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of global equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients. It can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
For the Jewish Communal Fund.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday morning by the scruff of the neck. Take this sunshine as an omen and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Heroes. They're the ones we look up to, or sometimes down at. If they're under your sink mending a broken pipe. From plumbing to plastering, heating to electrics. At Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up at the Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
Sunrun is set to be a myth in the American rooftop solar market. This is all through about a $1.5 billion takeover of its rival, Vivint Solar. We are joined now by Sunrun CFO. It's Tom von Reichbauer. Talk to me about what this deal means to you, really, in terms of size and scope and scale to get you to where you want to be.
This transaction helps us get to a new level of scale where we can reach more customers and solve a really important problem that's even more pressing today. Customers want more choice in their energy consumption. They're facing increasing electricity prices, and as they spend...
Hey, Joss. Sorry, mate. I have no idea what you're saying. Okay?
Concern as well that there is a solar race going on with Tesla. How do you feel you're positioned relative to some of the competitors in this space?
We're really excited about where this transaction sets us up to reach a new level of scale. 500,000 customers operating in 23 states with nearly 9,000 employees. And we think the combination helps us deliver on efficiencies that will enable us to bring more products and more affordable solutions to customers at an even faster pace through combining our R&D efforts. We have a lot of respect for Tesla, and we think competition's good. We think there's a lot of opportunity out there for many people to participate in this.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stocks are rising with U.S. stock index futures ahead of earnings from big U.S. banks that'll act as a barometer of economic health as the pandemic continues to rage. The dollar is steady. Oil is slipping ahead of an OPEC Plus meeting this week at which the group may announce plans to start tapering historic production cuts. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. And S&P futures are up 11 points this morning. Dow futures are up 126 and NASDAQ futures up 53. The DAX in Germany's up 1.1%. The 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds. The yield 0.63%. And the yield on the 2-year is at 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil's down 1.7% or 69 cents at $39.86 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.30 at $18.14.20 an ounce. The euro 1.1308 against the dollar. British pound 1.2597. And the yen is at 107.06. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. A devastating wave of new COVID-19 cases over the weekend, including Florida, with a record 15,000 cases in a single day on Sunday. Doctors are now warning that ICU units across the country are near or at capacity. Almost 60 U.S. universities filed a brief supporting Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in their effort to stop the Trump administration from enforcing new visa guidelines guidelines that would bar some international students from entering and staying in the country to attend college. Stanford and Duke universities and the 7 other Ivy League schools filed a brief last night in the case. Washington won't be the Redskins after today, according to multiple reports, after mounting public pressure, including from its biggest sponsors. The NFL team will drop the name. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. As we get this week started, Dennis Gartman joins us, economist and former publisher of the Gartman Letter. Good, as always, to talk with you and get your insights on the markets broadly, Dennis. Looking at futures contracts this morning, we're looking at gains. Even as Michael mentioned, gains continue to show themselves on coronavirus counts, particularly in Florida. It's worse than it's ever been. I mean, how much longer can the markets continue to outrun what's happening with this virus?
Nathan, write this down. The market will continue to go up until it stops. That's the best that I can come up with after 45 years of being in the business. I stand stunned by the continued slowness of the U.S. economy. Yes, we're rebounding, but not that much. The numbers over the weekend, as far as the coronavirus are concerned, are stunning, to say the very least. And yet we see the market continue to go higher. Stocks continue to rise. I guess it's just simply that we must understand that the monetary authorities, whether it's here in the United States, whether it's in Europe, whether it's the Bank of Japan, whether it's the Bank of China, whether it's the Bank of Canada, are all remaining expansionary. And as I like to say, their margin account is larger than mine will ever be and ever dream it could be. So don't fight the Fed. It makes no sense. It is utterly insensible. But as Lord Keynes once said, the market can remain irrational far longer than you or I can remain solvent. And my corollary to that is that the market will return to rationality the moment you have been rendered insolvent. So it continues to go higher. It stuns me. The only thing that makes sense to me is the fact that gold continues to outpace the Dow. The Dow is down on the year. The S&P is barely down on the year. The NASDAQ is slightly higher on the year, but gold is up dramatically year to date. So that expansionary policies by all the central banks that continue, and this is a big week for monetary policy from the central banks. I think we have six meetings by the major central banks of the world this week. Don't hold me to the number, but it's a large number. And they're all going to remain expansionary, and that continues to remain bullish of the gold market. So I continue to be long of gold, see every reason to be, and stand in awe and stunned by the strength of the stock markets.
Yeah, I got to ask you, I mean, how unusual is it to see the kind of strength that we've seen in the equity markets over the last couple of months and the rally in gold that we've also seen? It's almost like a buy everything rally.
It is a truly buy everything rally. Even the bond market have been stronger than one would anticipate. I mean, do you really want to put money out to 30 years to buy the Treasury securities at what, a 1.53% yield? I think not. But yet, government bonds have been strong, corporate bonds have been strong, gold has been strong, stocks have been strong. As you said, it seems to be a buy everything circumstance. It doesn't make much sense, but that's the reality at the moment.
What do you expect to come out of earnings season? We're going to hear from the big banks this week. Does that bring a semblance of reality to markets?
Well, one would hope, but given the shape of the yield curve, it's tough to be a bank right now. I mean, the profits are being squeezed dramatically. The only thing they have is costs that they give to their clientele for I'm struck for a word right now, but and I apologize for that. But their earnings, their margins are, which is where banks make their real income, is not from trading or not from other circumstances, but from interest rate margins. And with the yield curve as narrowly defined as it is, as unevenly sloped as it is difficult. So I'm not going to pay a great good deal of attention to what the bank earnings are. I know they're not going to be wonderful, to say the very least, and I think they will be difficult to make the best case of all.
And in terms of earnings more broadly, do you expect that we'll get any kind of further clarity about what earnings expectations could be, given all the uncertainties in the economic recovery?
I'm going to make a simple answer to that. The answer is no. I'm just stunned that we're going to have earnings at all from most industries. Yes, we're having a rebound in the economy from the egregious sell-off in economic circumstances that prevailed in the second quarter. And yes, the president tells us that we're going to have a V-shaped recovery, but I have very little expectation that's going to be resolved. You have the PPP program goes out of it goes out of existence at the end of July. Suddenly, a lot of people who have had money in their pockets are going to find themselves without money in their pockets, and things are going to get very difficult. But nonetheless, stocks continue to go higher. It just stuns me, to say the very least.
We're going to talk more about the shape of the recovery later on this hour. Dennis Gartman, former publisher of the Gartman Letter, is with us for the full hour this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. So looking forward to talking with Dennis in the next few minutes here. Ahead of all that, futures, as we say, and equities broadly, continue to rally on this Monday morning with S&P futures higher by 7 points. Dow futures up 87. NASDAQ futures higher by 37 points. 10-year higher by 6/30 seconds. Yield at 0.62%. 2-year yield 0.14%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The week investors have been waiting for kicks off trading this morning. Companies start reporting earnings for the last quarter this week. The reports from big banks that'll kick things off tomorrow are expected to act as a barometer of economic health. A UBS money manager expects earnings will recover during the second half of the year. So stock futures right now are rising. S&P futures up 11, NASDAQ futures 51, Dow futures up 118 points. Oil futures, however, are down almost 75 cents to $39.81 a barrel. Traders expect OPEC and their allies, who meet this week, to ease supply cuts. Millionaires from the U.S. and 6 other countries are telling their governments, tax us. They call themselves Millionaires for Humanity. The group, which includes Disney heiress Abigail Disney and a former managing director of BlackRock, say their taxes need to be raised substantially and permanently, that the pandemic could push millions more into poverty, and charity isn't the answer. Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternatives?
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So, you've been holed up for a while.
Not in here!
The place has got a little, let's say, lived in. At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen or bathroom from design to show off ready. And to keep everything safe, you can book a free virtual design appointment. Plus, now there's up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Cure your house embarrassment safely with Wix. For more offer details, see wix.co.uk.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
What would the world be like if we listened more? At Honda, our ears are always open to new ideas. Oh, there's one now, knocking on our eardrum. What's that? What if we made a car with cameras instead of wing mirrors? A robot mower that knows when it's time to cut the grass. A self-balancing motorcycle. And what if by 2022, all of our mainstream cars were hybrid or electric? Huh. Great idea. Thanks, ears. Honda. The power of dreams.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining to start the week, and as Florida hits a record for coronavirus infections, it's reporting more than 15,000 daily cases, the highest level ever for any state. At the same time, the push to reopen Florida cases is gathering steam. Miami-Dade Superintendent Alberto Carvalho plans to open sports training camps at schools later this month.
We're going to obviously do our very best in our community, considering where the health data currently is.
And speaking on NBC's Meet the Press, Carvalho said science, not politics, needs to drive decisions on schools.
The push to reopen classrooms is also coming on strong from the White House. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos took to Fox News Sunday to...
Hi, Harish. Sorry, I think you can't make on binary options with our strategy, because it will, in order for you to trade binary options, you will have specific time, like 20 seconds or 1 minute. In our case, you will hold positions for 1 day, 2 days. We don't put stop loss. We always put stop on profit. So basically, probably on binary options will not work with our strategy. It's best if you will use margin account, CFD options, ETFs, all these kind of things. But binary options will not work. Okay?
Officials, including Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. The move is seen as largely symbolic and as retaliation for U.S. measures tied to the treatment of ethnic minorities in China.
And on the corporate front, we have an acquisition shaping up in the chip industry. Sources tell us Analog Devices is close to a deal to buy Maxim Integrated Products for about $17 billion.
Hi, Vikram. Have no idea why right now it jumped to 13,000. No charts. We have some charts. We're not YouTubers, so you probably know better than I do. Is it fake views or not? For me, we're traders, so I trade real money. So I don't really care how many viewers I have, because I have already customers. So it's up to you. You can watch it. You can copy trades. It's free. If you don't want to watch it, you're welcome to keep it on. Okay? Pacifica, I will not give you advice. I don't give advice at all on what to trade, because you have to have another license. It's better for you to use Academy or other channels. We're traders. We trade live with day traders, and we trade for our clients, so they can watch, they can copy our trades, but we don't give advice. Okay?
New York, among several restrictions, no more than 15 children will be allowed in the classroom. 21 people have suffered minor injuries in an explosion and fire on board a ship at Naval Base San Diego. The cause of the fire on the USS Bonham Richard is under investigation. Rear Admiral Philip Sobek.
An 1,800-foot perimeter has been established around the USS Bonham Richard and the surrounding buildings on the base and been evacuated to ensure safety of personnel.
Officials said about 160 sailors and officers were on board, far fewer than the 1,000 typically on the ship when it's on active duty. Democratic nominee Joe Biden has taken a 5-point lead over President Donald Trump among voters in Texas following a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths there. That's according to new polling. A Dallas Morning News.
Kevin, hi. We trade, I can show you right now. On our trade session, you can see this screen. Only one screen will show you. We trade Japanese yen, British pound, Canadian dollar, euro, and Bitcoin. So TradeStation will show you just one screen. So this is what we'll show you, and we trade all markets all over the world. But you can see only this, okay?
Did so to cover up for the president. And Stone made no secret of the fact that he wanted this relief and that he was withholding information to protect the president.
The White House earlier said Stone is a victim of the Russia hoax and that the left and its allies in the media perpetuated for years. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's just before 5:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report with John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, as of today, they are no longer the Washington Redskins after a long, drawn-out battle where team owner Dan Snyder had steadfastly refused to even consider a name change despite calls for years to do it. When a corporate push came, Snyder finally relented. The question now is what the team will now be called. There are reportedly trademark issues to be worked out. Rajon Rondo broke his thumb at Laker practice last night. He'll miss most, if not all, of the upcoming NBA playoffs. The Lakers' backcourt was already without Avery Bradley, who opted out of the restart. The two stars on the Lakers, LeBron James and Anthony Davis, two of the few who have decided not to have social justice messages on their uniform. NHL training camps officially open today. Commissioner Gary Bettman says he never doubted his sport would return.
Certainly by March 12th. And I believe, based on the way we were all interacting and we were problem solving and we were discussing things and modeling things, I believe that we would get to this point because it was the right thing to do for the game and everybody involved with the game.
24 teams will head to Hub Cities July 26th. Rangers and Islanders go to Toronto. The games start August 1st. While there'll be a lot of hockey in Toronto, the Blue Jays are not sure they'll be able to play there. Canadian health officials have not yet signed off on it, so the Blue Jays are considering playing their games in Buffalo. MLS games have resumed, but two teams, Dallas and Nashville, are out due to numerous positive tests, and yesterday's game between Toronto and Washington had to be postponed. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Moves from New York City to Connecticut have more than doubled from the prior year since the city shutdown began in March. That's according to moving company Flat Rate Moving. Real estate professionals tell Dow Jones they're also hearing of increased interest in commercial office space from New York-based firms. Child care programs in the city are set to reopen today in New Jersey after being closed for several months due to the pandemic. More than 3,000 programs will reopen across the city with requirements including social distancing, which means no more than 15 people can be in a room at a time. Well, the annual New York International Air Show at New York Stewart International Airport is still set to take off for the weekend of August 29th. Orange County Executive Stephen Newhouse says they're moving forward with plans for the show, which he says will look different than previous events because of COVID-19. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
All right, Ed, thank you. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting the extra $600 a week in unemployment benefits will end early for jobless workers in Florida.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. The world is drinking less coffee while office workers stay home.
I'm Caroline Hetko, Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the government launching a campaign to prepare business for the post-Brexit transition.
I'm Steve Potusk, and on 1010 Wins in New York, we're talking about a New Jersey hedge fund winning the bidding for the bankrupt newspaper chain McClatchy.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Ford says it'll test employees with suspected COVID-19 in 2 Ohio cities.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. A couple other stories we're following. Credit Suisse may reportedly cut hundreds of jobs. Swiss media say the bank is considering different savings plans that would allow it to reach profit targets. The report says Credit Suisse may thin out its domestic branch network after the coronavirus outbreak gave its online operations a boost. Shares of Churchill Capital are up more than 40% in early trading. The special purpose vehicle is merging with healthcare services provider Multiplan in an $11 billion deal. Multiplan helps insurance companies find cost savings in healthcare claims. The latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is online now. It's the heist issue, including the empty frames that remain the art world's biggest mystery. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio, or watch it on YouTube weekdays from 2 to 6 p.m. Wall Street time. Get global business, finance, and tech news on your TV, computer, or mobile device. Just visit youtube.com and search Bloomberg Global News. S&P futures higher by almost 12 points on this Monday morning. Dow futures up 132. NASDAQ futures a gain of almost 53 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
I'm placing an order to sell short euro. The order placed at the price 113.176. So 113.176. Short order placed. So let's see if it will get executed. Okay?
against employment tribunal claims. Now is the right time. Sign up for your free demo at brighthr.com.
Every sound, every voice, every note. Expect perfection with Lin products. 5 decades of innovation deliver that distinct Lin sound, bringing you closer to your music and films. From turntables, loudspeakers, and streaming devices, you can guarantee Lin to provide room-filling, amplifying, jaw-dropping sound that all becomes clear when you hear it. Beautiful listening experiences, hand-built by Lin. Visit linproducts.co.uk to book your experience at one of our retailers. Or join us in Harrods in the 5th floor technology department.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
And at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Dr. Anthony Fauci is reportedly under fire as coronavirus cases climb. Fauci has openly disagreed with President Trump. A White House official told CNN News that several White House officials are concerned about the number of times Fauci has been wrong.
President Trump and some White House officials are taking issue with Dr. Anthony Fauci, a member of the administration's coronavirus task force. Democratic Representative Adam Schiff of California.
Dr. Fauci is the most respected voice in the country on how we ought to be dealing with this pandemic. And to be trying to sideline him or diminish him or discredit him is just atrocious.
President Trump, meanwhile, made his first public appearance with a mask Saturday during a visit to Walter Reed Medical Center. I'm John Lawrence reporting.
U.S. deaths from COVID-19 surpassed 135,000. Mexico moves to become the 4th country with the highest total. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS. Global stocks are rising along with U.S. stock index futures ahead of earnings from big U.S. banks that'll act as a barometer of economic health as the pandemic continues to rage. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 11 points. Dow futures up 128. NASDAQ futures up 51. The DAX in Germany's up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury up 4/30 seconds. Yield 0.63%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is down 1.6%. On 63 cents at $39.92 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.40 at $18.14.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1316 against the dollar. British pound 1.2602 and the yen 107.06. And Google saying it plans to spend $10 billion over the next 5 to 7 years to help accelerate the adoption of digital technologies in India. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, thank you very much. The Florida Department of Health has reported more than 15,000 new coronavirus cases. That's the highest number of new cases in a single day by any state since the pandemic began. Actress Kelly Preston has died. Her husband, John Travolta, announced the 57-year-old actress lost her 2-year battle with breast cancer. The U.S., China, and the United Arab Emirates are sending spacecraft to Mars in quick succession beginning this week. It is the most sweeping effort yet to seek signs of ancient microscopic life at Mars while scoping out a place for future astronauts. Washington's NFL team will get rid of the name Redskins today, according to multiple reports. Owner Dan Snyder and the organization will announce the move 2 weeks before the start of training camp. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is 5:49 on Wall Street. I'm Nathan Hager, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak. And we continue our conversation now with Dennis Gartman, the economist and former publisher of the Gartman Letter. Wanted to pick up where we left off, Dennis, in terms of the shape of the economic recovery going forward. As the coronavirus continues to surge, states are beginning to pull back on some of their economic activity. Up to now, the word from the White House had been that the third quarter was going to be a transition quarter toward a boom into the fourth quarter. Is that something that could still be on the table?
It's something that could be on the table. Let us hope that it is upon the table. I doubt that it is upon the table, however, and if it is, I think it shall fall off the table. I'm not nearly as optimistic as the administration is. I don't think we're going to get a V-shaped recovery under any circumstance. I think, obviously, we've got a V-shaped recovery in the NASDAQ. We've had a V-shaped recovery in the S&P, a V-shaped recovery in the Dow, but I don't think that those are going to be illustrative of what's happening in the economy itself. As I said, we're going to be running out of PPP money fairly soon. I think the unemployment numbers are going to start looking a lot worse in the coming weeks and months than they have been over the course of the past 2 months or so. So, yes, it is still upon the table, but I have my very serious doubts as to whether it will remain upon that table over the long period of time going forward.
There is a lot of attention on the fiscal stimulus beginning to run out later on this month. What's your vision of what we could see in terms of further fiscal stimulus? Do you think it's coming?
Oh, there's no question it's going to be coming. It has to come. I'm somewhat to the right of Genghis Khan politically and certainly a fiscal conservative, but there are times when fiscal conservative natures have to be tossed out the window, and this is one of those times. So, yes, there is more fiscal stimulus coming. There's infrastructure spending coming. There's expansion of the monetary authorities coming. There's no question that it shall come, and given the circumstances that prevail, it's much needed. So it's on its way.
What do you see it looking like? Is it just a further continuation of the programs you've already seen? Could we see something more like an infrastructure package?
I hope there's an infrastructure package. That's really what's needed. Just giving people free money is not really the greatest signal that you can give, but given the circumstances that prevailed in March, April, and May of this year, that's what had to happen. And when you come up with legislation as quickly as we did, there are going to be mistakes that are made, and that's just normal. That's just to be expected. Those will probably be resolved, but will there be infrastructure spending in the next expansionary budget? Absolutely. It has to be. Can't be otherwise.
What's your read on some of the messaging we're hearing from the White House that the country is in a better place than we were just a few months ago in terms of the pandemic when you think about testing capacity and developments toward a therapeutic? Does that boost the outlook for the economic recovery?
Oh, we're still months, maybe even a year away from having some sort of ability to inoculate people and give them,
Position opened. We open short position on 113.70. Short position opened at 113.70.
Very least, and yet here we have the NASDAQ up 50 points on the day. It's stunning to me.
And other than the infection counts, what sorts of high-frequency data should we be looking at when we think about what the recovery is going to look like?
The only number that I pay attention to are the weekly jobless claims numbers. I think those are historically those are very good numbers to look at. They have been down now for 14 or 15 weeks in a row. They'll probably be down again this week. But if they start to rise, that's the number to pay attention to. The administration says we'll have a V bottom. We've had a V bottom in the stock markets, but I don't think we're going to have a V bottom in the economy. Yes, the third quarter numbers will look better than the second quarter numbers, but they have to. They can't be worse. The question shall be what shall happen in the fourth quarter. I've said all along this will be a W recovery, and the problem with the W recoveries and my fear is that the legs on as we move out in time will become less and less constructive. So I'm not of the school of thought that says this is going to be a V recovery. I have every reason to doubt them, and thus far the numbers seem to show me that I'm right.
When you look at the weekly jobless claims figures, how do you see the health of the labor market going forward? Are you focused on this as temporary layoffs? Do you see something of a more dramatic disruption of the labor market?
Thus far, the numbers have been temporary. Let's hope that Let's hope that the decline of the last 14 weeks is indicative of a permanent reduction in the weekly jobless claims numbers. But let's remember, we're talking about 1 million jobless claims when only a year ago anything over 200,000 was something to be disturbed by. So I doubt that we're going to get back to anything under 500,000 in the course of the next 6 months or so. And I'm very disturbed by it. I have great concern about what's going to happen to the economy unless we have a huge infrastructure spending program coming through, which I hope we have. But I have my doubts as to whether that's going to be sufficient to stem what I think is going to be an extended economic downturn.
And in the time we have left, I want to get your thoughts on the tensions we're starting to see again between the U.S. and China. Is that something that could pose a significant headwind as well? The latest evidence of that, obviously, the symbolic sanctions on top U.S. officials from China.
Well, the United States and China are butting heads on a rather consistent basis, and what bothers me living where I do in Southern Virginia, where Norfolk Naval Base is the headquarters of the U.S. Navy, the number of carriers that we have traversing through the South China Sea, one of these days we're going to have an untoward circumstance that prevails when one hothead Navy member of ours abuts a Navy vessel of the Chinese. I'm very concerned about those sorts of circumstances, and those are only going to get worse, not better. So the United States and China, I think, are on a not only on a trade circumstance consequential, but on a warlike circumstance consequential. I'm very fearful. Let us hope that my fears are ill-advised. Let us hope that better things prevail. But the fact that we have our military with aircraft carriers traversing the South China Sea close to the military naval vessels of the Chinese, very bothersome. And yet you have the Chinese and the Indians fighting in the high territories of the Hindu Kush. There are things out there that bother me more than I have been bothered in the past 15 or 20 years.
Dennis Gartman, I hate to leave it there, but unfortunately we're running short on time here, but obviously a lot of catalysts to look at as we game out what the third quarter could look like and the recovery for the rest of the year. Thanks, as always, for your insights. Really appreciate having you on with us. That's Dennis Gartman, economist and former publisher of the Gartman Letter, with us this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen?
I need to refresh the browser, so please, in 1 second, can you press F5 to refresh the browser? I need to refresh the streamer, okay?
Markets